Chapter 1749. Feng Yi said, I thought that the Lord already had this thought a long time ago. Feng Zhen glanced at his son. Yes, this kid was no longer the good bamboo shoot he was proud of, but Feng Yi asked in a low voice, Dare I ask, father, how do you think Xia and Dongxing were destroyed? Feng Zhen's brows furrowed. His son's question had a deeper meaning. If we want the Xianxia dynasty to survive, we can't fall on the same question again. Feng Zhen stared at his son with a strange gaze. He was silent for a long time, making Wan Xiu, a bystander, unable to sit still. After a long time, Feng Zhen sighed and said to his son, What do you think? Say it. Feng Zhen's guess was right. Feng Yi's secret letter was indeed in Jiang Pingji's hands. Only she and Wei Si had seen the contents of the letter. A bad bamboo produces a good bamboo shoot. What good things did Feng Zhen do in his past life to have such a son? Wei Si carefully folded the secret letter, brought over an oil lamp and lit it. The orange-red flame shot up fiercely and engulfed the secret letter in an instant. Wen Zheng and Huayu's eldest wife are also impressive. Given time, they will definitely have a place in the imperial court, Jiang Pingji smiled. This also shows that the Golden Scale Academy's education is successful. Feng Yi's children are the best proof. Under the relatively open education model of the Golden Scale Academy, the students' horizons were broader than expected. They could vaguely understand the meaning of Jiang Pingji's chess game. Of course, it was due to their talent, but the education they received also played a big role. Wei Si said, My lord, is it really like what Feng Yi and the others said? Jiang Pingji said, These children, they are still young. Their bold guess is only 30% correct. Due to the limitations of the era, very few scholars dared to blame the destruction of a country on issues such as taxes, gentry, and land annexation. Because most scholars were of noble birth. When they questioned these issues, they were also denying their social status and harming their own interests. Feng Yi and the others were able to jump out of the fence. This kind of awareness was rare. Wei Si said, How does my lord intend to respond? Jiang Pingji smiled. Grant them marriage. Just let them know. She had spent so many years plotting, now was not the time to bare her fangs. This was because the trap she had set up was challenging the class of interests that had been deeply rooted for hundreds of years. It concerned the interests and fates of too many people. What was the root cause of the destruction of Xia Kingdom and Dongxing Kingdom? The distribution of benefits among different classes was uneven. With the fewest people hogging 99% of the resources, how could society not be chaotic? The change of dynasties was nothing more than a shuffle of resources. If Jiang Pingji wanted the future dynasty to last longer and for the people to enjoy more peace, she had to work hard to distribute the resources more evenly. If it was divided evenly, it meant that the guy who had 99% of the resources would have to take out the things in his pocket. No one was a saint. It was impossible for the landowning households to benefit from this. Jiang Pingji wanted to think of a way to slow down the annexation of land. In essence, she was affecting the fundamental interests of this class. Moreover, she had also established the Golden Scale Academy and vigorously promoted education. She was challenging the aristocratic class's monopoly on education under smiley face angle underscore. Interestingly enough, if one were to get to the bottom of it, the noble landowning families were once powerful landowners. Through repeated political investments and gambles, they obtained political and economic privileges. After a few generations of operation, they started from the local government and gradually got involved with the central government. They gained a firm foothold and gained more rights to speak. They huddled together and grew rapidly. They annexed countless lands and enjoyed various privileges. Gradually, they became famous families in later generations. The cake was limited. If they wanted to enjoy more benefits, they had to kick down those who tried to climb up to share their cake. Therefore, the monopoly of officialdom and culture came into being. Jiang Pingji wanted to break this monopoly. It was useless to simply rely on violence, killing people, and crushing them. Without this group of landowning households, the poor who climbed up would also become the new nobles. It would multiply and multiply endlessly. Don't think that the poor would represent the masses and fight for the interests of the people just because they suffered from the disdain of the landowning households. The poor would only work hard to climb up and join the group of landowning households. They would transform into a new class of exploitation with a peace of mind. Therefore, Jiang Pengji really had to deal with not only the landowning households but also the new nobles who were born poor. The Golden Scale Academy and the promotion of culture and education were to break the cultural monopoly. The imperial examination to select scholars was introduced in the future to break the monopoly of officialdom. Of course, the audience in the streaming room also said that the imperial examination to select scholars had its pros and cons. Jiang Pengji still needed to do more research. She tried to integrate the examination and teaching system of the Federation in her previous life and transform it into a new system that could adapt to this era. At least, she had to let the people at the bottom see the hope of changing their fate. As long as the source of officials was expanded, it would naturally have an impact on the monopoly of the landowning households. The new nobles would thin out the original cake of the landowning households. However, Jiang Pengji not only had to guard against the landowning households, but she also had to guard against the new nobles. Therefore, how to control them reasonably and narrow the gap between them and the ordinary people was the most important thing. As this problem surfaced, the reform of taxes and corvée was inevitable. The original system of taxes and corvée gave the landowning households a green light. It made them richer and the poor people poorer. The pace of land annexation was getting faster and faster. In the end, the land in the hands of the people would all be in the hands of the landowning households. The balance of resources would be completely tilted. If it was another era, the tax rate of the rich could be increased and a high inheritance tax could be set so that the gap between the rich and the poor would not be too big. However, in this era, inheritance tax could not be counted on. It was also difficult to implement a high tax rate for the exploitative class. After all, the people who made the laws were the evil exploitative class. If she did that, she was afraid that more than half of her confidants would betray her. She was not that reckless, so she had to change her way of thinking. While reducing the burden of the people as much as possible, she would create income for them. At the same time, she could achieve her goal of defeating the local tyrants by cooking frogs in warm water. The existing system of taxes and corvée was definitely not feasible. It was one of the accomplices of land annexation. Compared to the landowning households and commoners, the ordinary people were the weak. It was difficult for them to keep the land in their hands. Jiang Pengji made a clean cut. She made all the land belong to the state and used this to curb land annexation. Rather than saying it belonged to the state, it was better to say that it belonged to the royal family. This required a firm fist. So far, Jiang Pengji had done a good job in this aspect. She plundered wherever she went. On this basis, the miscellaneous tax items related to the land tax would be merged into the land tax. This would reduce the workload of the government in collecting taxes and reduce the complicated links. This would also reduce the risk of tax evasion. The people would rent land of varying sizes from the government according to the number of people in their families. The land tax would be based on the people's annual harvest. The more they farmed, the more they harvested, the more taxes they paid. If this decision were to spread, the landowning households and commoners would collectively explode. Jiang Pengji thought about it and wrote a letter to Feng Zhen. Chapter 1750. Jiang? It would take at least a month for Ji's secret letter to be sent to Wanzhou. By the time the letter arrived, it would be the first month of the new year. Feng Zhen was worried about his naughty son, but it was rare for the family to be together for the new year. He couldn't keep his son locked up. Under Wan Xiuer's persuasion, Feng Zhen finally let go of Feng Yi, who had been locked up for 2 days. But he was a petty person. No matter how he thought about it, he was unhappy. His naughty son had made such a big mistake, but he couldn't scold or hit him. It was so frustrating. In the end, Feng Zhen went to the academy's teacher as a parent. He hoped that the teacher in charge of teaching would give Feng Yi more homework. It would be best if he could drown in a sea of questions. Feng Yi was only locked up for 2 days. To outsiders, it was said that he had caught a cold. His character and style were too good, so outsiders didn't think much of it. On the other hand, Changxing's few insiders were on tenterhooks for 2 days. They saw with their own eyes that Feng Yi's mental state was normal and he was as elegant as usual. They heaved a sigh of relief. Little did they know that a major event that would affect their future was happening. Speaking of which, the students of the highest grade in Jinlin Academy were mostly between 17 and 20 years old. They had been studying in Jinlin Academy for a long time. The students who had been studying for the longest time, such as Feng Yi's batch, had been studying for almost 12 years. The shortest ones had been studying for at least 10 years. There was no doubt that both the male and female students were the students that the academy's teachers put the most effort into. The teaching materials they used were the freshest. The teachers would change the teaching materials according to their learning progress and absorption. Well, to put it bluntly, they were experimental guinea pigs. However, as a group of precious guinea pigs, the academy's teaching resources would be given to them first. They deserved to be called painstaking efforts. At this point, many students didn't lack knowledge but experience. They could master the skills they had learned through personal experience. In terms of academics, many teachers felt that they had nothing to teach them. If these students continued to be locked up in Jinlin Academy, it wouldn't be good for them. Instead, it would be harming them. The time after turning 20 was the golden time to work hard. It couldn't be wasted. It was better to let the students graduate and leave the academy to explore the wider world. There was no end to learning. If the students still wanted to study miscellaneous books, they could borrow books from Jinlin Academy and take them home to slowly study. The elders of Jinlin Academy, led by Master Yuan Jing, felt that they couldn't keep delaying the students, so they discussed this issue. In the end, they gave G wrote a booklet. At the end of the day, Jinlin Academy was an official academy. Whether the students graduated or not was not decided by the big shots, so why would they need Jiang Lushi? G made the decision. In addition, after the first batch of students graduated, most of them came to her to apply for jobs. How could they hide this from Jiang? Big Boss G? Ginger? G also agreed, but she had her own ideas on how to select students to become officials. After so many years of planning, it's finally time to move forward with the selection of students. Wouldn't the majority of the landowning households explode with rage if they proposed to select talents through a systematic examination right off the bat? Now that he had proposed the concept of dividing up the subjects, these guys couldn't influence the results even if they wanted to. First Ginger? Ji Yunshu's wings were full of feathers, so the nobles who opposed her simply didn't have the ability to meet her head-on. Whoever dared to say no in front of her, she would make them cold sky X break. In the year when Ji Yunshu established the library of Jinlin Academy, she used a similar examination method to select students. At first, the landowning households were very angry, but because they were small in scale, there weren't many people in each expedition, so their opposition was just loud thunder and small rain. Third, with the accumulation of these years, the grassroots and middle levels of the Jinlin Academy's expeditions had formed a certain scale, so their voices were no longer as soft as mosquitoes. Although they couldn't meet the landowning households head-on, they were still a force to be reckoned with. Ginger? If Ji Yunshu proposed to divide up the subjects, these people were the least qualified to oppose. Even if they didn't support her, they wouldn't jump out to make things difficult for her. Finally, Ginger? Ji Yunshu had been helping Jinlin Academy build a positive image all these years. The students of the academy had long become a unique scenery, and the people accepted them very well. In addition to the main headmaster of Jinlin Academy, Ginger, Ji Yunshu also used the method of private bidding to establish 22 branches in various provinces and counties. Because of good management, Ginger, while Ji Yunshu was friendly to the people, she also won over a small number of small landowning households and ordinary people. The influence of Jinlin Academy was incomparable. Now, the first batch of students was about to graduate, and their final destination would inevitably attract a lot of attention. In the eyes of outsiders, these students were Ginger. Ji Yunshu had poured years of painstaking effort into them, so she definitely wouldn't let the fertile water flow to the fields of outsiders. However, the fact was that Ginger? Ji Yunshu refuted all the suggestions of the military expeditions. People's talents are divided into different grades. Some people are geniuses but waste the food given by God, while some people are stupid but diligent. If all of them are expeditions and treated equally, then what's the point of their hard work? If they can get into Lin Academy and get into the highest grade, who will take the trouble to study in the future? Ginger? Ji Yunshu sternly refuted the guy who proposed this bad idea. He didn't care about the old friendship. Even if this famous scholar had contributed a lot to the construction and development of Lin Academy, she still had to refute him. She wanted all the students to know that it was not so easy to get into an official position, and only the winners could stand out. So, she took advantage of the situation and proposed the concept of dividing up the subjects. With the previous arrangements, this concept didn't encounter much opposition. Even if some people objected, they didn't dare to say anything. Dividing up the subjects was a big deal. Ginger? Ji Yunshu planned to preside over it personally. Firstly, it was a show of seriousness. Secondly, it was a deterrent. Thirdly, she could discuss the specific matters of dividing up the subjects with the leaders of Lin Academy. There couldn't be any accidents in the first imperial examination. She threw the matters of Nanxing to Fu Wang, Yang Si, Yang Tao, and Yen Lin. Yang Tao and Yen Lin were rendered speechless by her actions. A year ago, Yang Tao was still fighting with Ginger. Now, he was going to hand over the entire situation of Nanxing to them. She was too ambitious. Even if Fu Wang was the commander, Yang Si, Xie and Li, a few important ministers were watching over them, but it was undeniable that Yang Tao had a lot of military power. If Yang Tao wanted to rebel, Ginger? She would be in a terrible fix. When Yang Tao shared his thoughts with his little friend, Yen Lin's little friend seemed to roll his eyes at him. Jingzi, did you forget? Forget what? I forgot that both our wives and children were sent to Wanzhou. They had hostages in their hands. How could they be worried about Yang Tao's rebellion? Should Yang Tao be worried about Ginger? Would that bastard Ji kill the hostages? He was mentally tired. Wei Si also expressed that he was mentally tired. He didn't want to be treated as a pendant by the Lord, who took him everywhere. If this continued, even a blind person would know that they had an affair. Ginger? Yunshu said sternly, I'm not good at painting. Naturally, I have to take Zixiao with me. Looking at her sincere big eyes, she didn't take Wei Si with her to have an affair. If that was the case, why would she take Lu Zheng with her? Yes, Lu Zheng and his adopted daughter, Kang Xintong, were once again the third wheel. Wei Si hesitated. Could it be that he had been single for too long and his thoughts were impure, so he misunderstood his lord? My lord said that I'm good at painting. Is there something that you want me to do? Ginger. Ji Yunshu rubbed her hands with a smile and warmed Wei Si's hands with her palm. The first batch of leeks in Lin Academy is ready. It's time to harvest them. Chapter 1751. Jiang Pingji continued. Previously, Master Yuanjing wrote to me and asked for my opinion. He said that the highest-ranking students of the Golden Scale Academy have reached the age of graduation. If they continue to stay in the academy, they will only be wasting their best years. They might even become useless. It's better to let them graduate and go out to explore the world. I think it makes sense. However, graduation is a big event. We have to make it look good. I want to design clothes that are exclusive to the graduating students. The clothes and accessories must have a certain meaning to deepen the students' sense of identity and belonging to the Golden Scale Academy. Apart from that, I also want to make a graduation certificate as proof that they have graduated from the academy. Wei Si was used to his lord's occasional ideas. He had made graduation clothes and certificates in his previous life. Wei Si was not surprised at all. However, Wei Si said, this matter has a heavy meaning. I think it's better for you to design it yourself. Having been the leader of the Internet Water Army for so many years, Wei Si's control of people's hearts was as pure as fire. He knew that some casual actions could win people's hearts. The effect was no less than throwing money and being courteous to the wise. He could draw the finished product, but it was best for Jiang Pingji to design it herself. The effect would be the best. Smiley face, angle, anyway, The students of the Golden Scale Academy had been wearing the school uniform designed by his lord for more than 10 years. The graduation clothes would also be designed by his lord. There was a beginning and an end. Wei Ci knew his lord's aesthetic standards. She would definitely make the students handsome, beautiful, and immortal. Zixiao is right. I can design it too. Jiang Pengji thought of the clothes she had seen before and shook her head secretly. They were too ugly. Even if they were designed by the big shots, Jiang Pengji could touch her conscience and say that ugliness was an original sin. She hoped that this batch of students would be handsome, beautiful, and immortal in the annals of history. She wanted future generations to see how good her aesthetic standards were. Hashtag being good or bad is temporary, but being handsome and beautiful is forever. Omega hashtag at that moment, Jiang Pengji's inspiration came. The men's graduation clothes were mainly robes with a round collar. They did not choose the current popular style because the round collar with narrow sleeves would save more fabric. The female's graduation uniform was based on a high-waisted skirt. The sleeves were also chosen to be narrow, and there was an extra top on top. The tip of the skirt was painted with the patterns of mountains, rivers, cranes, and pines and bamboos. The Golden Scale Academy's iconic cloud patterns would definitely not be lacking. Of course, Jiang Pengji also added green willow patterns on the cuffs to symbolize the Lu family. But in the center of the vest, there was a cartoonish round face of an iron-eating beast. Wait! Wei Ci was stunned as he watched. Your Highness, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate, Jiang Pengji said. What's wrong? In the future, this iron-eating beast's face will become a new clan tattoo. To allow the students of the Golden Scale Academy to use the clan emblem that only the royal family could use, how glorious was that for the scholars of this era? This would establish the unique position of the Golden Scale Academy, and at the same time, tie it firmly to the royal family. Jiang Pengji never suffered any losses. She was scheming and her tricks were hard to guard against. Wei Ci was speechless. It was one thing to use this iron-eating beast's face as the emblem of the royal family in his previous life, but he was doing it again in this life? The iron-eating beast is a symbol of power. After all, it's a ferocious beast that followed Qiyu in his expeditions. Jiang Pengji's words were pure lies. She took a fancy to the iron-eating beast only because it looked too cute. Wei Ci hesitated and said, "Then your highness, if you tattoo it on the clothes of the students," someone spouted nonsense righteously and sternly, "it means that the scholars who graduate will be loyal to the emperor and the country. They will follow Qiyu like a ferocious beast and will be the pillar of the country. In addition, on this day, they are allowed to wear clothes with the royal family emblem, which further symbolizes that they are the disciples of the emperor." Wei Ci was speechless. "I almost believed your words." He realized that even though he had been reborn, his ability to lie through his teeth was still inferior to his lord's. Under Jiang Pengji's strong arguments, she retained her opinion, but the accessories such as hair accessories and waist accessories were made by Wei Ci. He was really worried that his lord would make other messy things. Lu Zheng and his daughter smiled and did not say anything. On the way to Wanzhou, Lu Zheng picked up his wife and son along the way. "Wait, haven't you been single until now? When did he stop being single?" Because the two lives were different, Wei Ci could not guarantee that Lu Zheng's family had not been destroyed by the butterfly's wings. These days, Lu Zheng had been alone, and there was no mistress in the manor. Wei Ci thought that Lu Zheng was still a single middle-aged man. Lu Zheng said coldly, "Getting married and having children is an important matter related to the continuation of the family line. Apart from you, who else in the world is still single at this age?" Wei Ci was speechless. He took an arrow to the knee under Smitis angle, underskizing quickly added insult to injury and sneered, "Oh, my lord too." She did not give him a single young lord. There was no young lord at all. It was better to bury this couple. Jiang Pengji, who had been urged to get married all these years, continued to be indifferent. Wei Ci also pretended to be deaf and mute. Lu Zheng successfully picked up his wife and son. The couple had been separated for a long time. At this time, they had endless things to talk about. They directly left their annoying son to Kong Shintong to take care of. Because the journey to Wanzhou was too far, they would have to spend the New Year's Eve on the way. As the new year was approaching, the teachers in the academy were not as strict with the students' education as usual. The students in the lower grades continued to review the old and learn new things, while the students in the upper grades focused on self-study and discussion. Feng Yi always came to the classroom early. His diligence made the other students in the elite class sigh in admiration. Feng Yi was so hardworking because he felt that he could not keep up with his classmates since he had been suspended from school with the army for 2 years. He needed to work harder. The other students did not want to be overshadowed by Feng Yi, so they put in more effort. For a while, the atmosphere of studiousness was set off in the class, which made the teachers feel gratified. Feng Yi's behavior made the unlucky Sun Lan suffer. The Golden Scale Academy required ordinary students to stay in the dormitory. They could only see their parents once a month in the reception pavilion and return home once every 6 months. The student dormitory was in the Golden Scale Academy. The boys lived in the south of the academy, while the girls lived in the north. They were not allowed to approach the dormitory of the opposite sex without permission. Ordinary students had the advantage of being close to their dormitory when they went to class, but special day students like Feng Yi had to wake up earlier because they lived outside the school. Feng Yi was always able to arrive an hour before the start of the morning reading period. One could imagine how early he got up. Sun Lan had also been suspended from school with the army. He would be compared to Feng Yi in all aspects. He could only laugh bitterly and risk his life to accompany Feng Yi. "It's such a cold day. Can't you just laze in bed for a while?" When Sun Lan arrived at the classroom, Feng Yi's table was lit by a candle. The area outside the candle was pitch black. The cold wind was blowing and whistling outside the window. Feng Yi was not afraid of ghosts. Feng Yi sat up straight. The morning is the best time of the day. He heard Sun Lan's footsteps approaching. Along with the rustling of clothes, he sat down on the mat beside him. "It's too early." Chapter 1752. Every day, I'm under a seal called blanket. So what if I die of old age? The happiest way to die is to die from the heat in winter. You woke up so early. I have to risk my life to accompany you because of you. Look, I have dark circles under my eyes these days. Sun Lan yawned sleepily and tried to open her eyes. She couldn't help but complain to her friend, "Yesterday I met an acquaintance. He secretly asked me if I was too nymphomaniac. He even advised me to take it easy. No matter how young I am, I shouldn't be so tormented. God has mercy on me. I'm still a virgin. Even though I've been in the army for 2 years, learned a lot of dirty words, and seen a lot of shameless scenes, I still have self-control." Feng Yi smiled and said, "Just ignore them." Whether to ignore the busybodies who compared the two of them or ignore the acquaintances who misunderstood Sun Lan's innocence, it depends on what the listener thinks. Sun Lan and Feng Yi had known each other for a few years, so she naturally understood. She muttered, "Gossip is a fearful thing. How can you be so free and easy?" Sun Lan couldn't care less about what others said. He could only do his best to do his own thing. Looking at the dark sky outside, Sun Lan rubbed her hungry belly and took out a bun wrapped in a handkerchief from her sleeve. As soon as she opened it, a burst of steam and fragrance came out. Sun Lan took the thermos cup that contained thick meat soup from her waist. This thing was made by her lord. There were 4 layers in total. The innermost layer was made of porcelain, the second layer was made of copper, the third layer was also porcelain, and the fourth layer was made of bamboo to prevent falling. The inner layer could be tightened with a lid to prevent the soup from spilling out, and the outer layer had a bamboo cover. This thing had a thermal function, so it was quite convenient to use. "You woke up so early. Have you eaten breakfast?" Feng Yi turned a page and said, "Not yet." Sun Lan said, "I have extra here. Do you want to eat some first?" Feng Yi smiled. "It's not good to eat too much breakfast. Changxing said that she would bring some for me." Sun Lan took a big bite of the bun. Her cheeks were stuffed. She was a little full before she swallowed. How could she not be full after being forced to eat dog food? "Wrongly, I heard a rumor. Do you want to hear it?" Feng Yi didn't eat, so Sun Lan drank the meat buns and a whole pot of broth. The warm meat buns and broth filled Sun Lan's stomach, and at the same time, made him feel a comfortable warmth spread from inside his body. It was very comfortable. What news? Sun Lan was not a gossipy person. The gossip that he was talking about was definitely not about the Dong or Li family. It was most likely serious news. I heard that the Jinlin Academy has undergone a major change, Sun Lan said. I don't know the details yet. Feng Yi frowned slightly. Was it related to the great changes in the Jinlin Academy? Why didn't he receive any news? Her father hadn't mentioned anything about it, so where did Sun Lan hear this news from? Sun Lan said, "Didn't I collect homework from my classmates and send it to the teachers a few days ago?" Master Yuanjing happened to be there too. He said something to the teachers and asked them to speed up the assessment of the students and teach more practical things. He said that something big would happen in the academy next year. When he went over, Master Yuanjing and the others were almost done talking. He only heard the end of it. No matter what the change was, as a student of the Jinlin Academy, this news was also related to them, so they had to pay attention. Sun Lan said, "Grandpa isn't in Wanzhou, and I don't have any elders to talk to. I don't have any connections to ask for information." Feng Yi understood what Sun Lan meant. He said, "After school today, I'll ask my father about it." Her father, Feng Zhen, was one of the Lord's important officials. If there was a major change in the Jinlin Academy, there was no reason that he didn't know anything. The two talked for a while. The sky outside gradually brightened, and students arrived at the classroom one after another. They greeted each other in twos and threes, took out their books, sat in their seats, and began their morning reading. The Jinlin Academy had a strict schedule. Regardless of spring, summer, autumn, or winter, the students always entered at the beginning of the day and left at the end of the day. During this period, there was more than an hour for the students to have lunch. In the afternoon, the students entered at the beginning of the day and left at the end of the day. Winter came and went, and there was no exception. The teachers arrived a little later than the students, but not too late. However, it was a little strange today. The morning reading was almost over, but the teacher on duty hadn't arrived yet. Gradually, a few students couldn't sit still. They wondered why the teacher was late and couldn't focus on their books. Could it be that Teacher Nier is sick? The teacher who was teaching them was Master Yuanjing's son-in-law. His surname was Nie, his name was Sun, and his courtesy name was Chun. He used to be Huang Song's strategist. After Huang Song was defeated, Nie Sun was captured and surrendered. However, he gave up on being an official and turned to education. All these years, he had been helping his father-in-law, Master Yuanjing. After a few years, this extremely good-looking teacher, Nie Sun, had become the most handsome and popular teacher in the Jinlin Academy. In addition to Nie Sun, there was another popular teacher. That teacher was called Qing Jing, and it was said that he was also Master Yuanjing's disciple. However, compared to Nie Sun's outstanding appearance and gentle temperament, Qing Jing was quite strict and unapproachable. Under normal circumstances, no one dared to provoke Qing Jing. If a student made a mistake in Qing Jing's hands, they wouldn't be able to get away with it. Therefore, the senior students were more concerned about Nie Sun. If it was Qing Jing's turn to be on duty and didn't come today, not only would the students be worried, but they would also secretly feel lucky. It can't be. Yesterday, I saw the teacher coming back from the girls' class. I greeted him on the way and he seemed to be in good spirits. Being sick isn't something that accumulates over time. Maybe he didn't sleep well last night and caught a cold? The morning reading was almost over, and the students had the guts to gossip in low voices. While they were talking, the students sitting by the window saw a familiar figure and quickly gestured for the students who were talking to shut up. When Nie Sun came over, the students who were whispering were already sitting upright and still, holding the books they had copied by themselves and muttering. No one dared to ask why Nie Sun was late. Nie Sun explained himself first. He wasn't late. He just went to the girls' class to inform them of something. Now it was his turn to teach Class A. When Nie Sun spoke, everyone tacitly stopped the morning reading. More than 50 pairs of eyes looked at Nie Sun. Nie Sun's voice wasn't loud, but the students in the classroom could hear him clearly. In order for all the students to hear what the teacher said clearly, The students' seats were arranged in a circle, with a total of 3 circles inside and outside. The teacher was teaching at the podium in the middle. Only some special classes would change the arrangement. What I'm going to say next will affect your future. You all need to listen carefully. When Nie Sun said this, the expressions of many students changed. They were very nervous, but Nie Sun didn't give them any time to digest. He said directly, after careful discussion by Duke Lanting and a few great scholars of the Academy, they all agreed that the Academy can no longer teach you anything more. What? Chapter 1753. Among you, more than 90% of you are the first batch of students accepted when the Academy was established. You have been studying for 12 years. Life is but 100 years, and you have already spent more than 10% of it in the Academy. Nie Sun repeated what he had said several times. His eyes swept across the faces of the young people below, and his lips curled into a faint smile. In life, what we seek is nothing more than fame and fortune. You have studied hard for so many years, and it is finally time to show your ambition. Leave the Academy, there is a wider world. At this time, there was no concept of graduation. Even the aristocratic families couldn't provide more than 10 years of such high-quality and systematic education for their children. Basically, they had to learn as long as they lived. But the Golden Scale Academy was established by Jiang. In order to save teaching resources and reduce the teacher's burden, the senior students who had learned well should get lost. No, they should come out and work for her. Otherwise, what was the point of cultivating them for so many years? The senior students graduated from the Academy, and the first-grade students took their place. In this way, the leeks could be harvested batch after batch, growing and multiplying endlessly. If the students wanted to further their studies, they could borrow other books from the Golden Scale Pavilion. The headmaster of the Academy could not teach them for a lifetime. This news was like a bolt from the blue to most of the students. They were used to studying in the Academy, and were not ready to leave. Nie Sun told Jiang. Ji meant that graduation was not to drive the students out of the Academy, but to end this stage of study after they had completed their studies in the Academy and met the requirements. At the same time, graduation also meant that their years of study were recognized by the Academy and the famous scholars. They were qualified to use this as capital to promote themselves, and even be recruited by the Lanting Duke. When this news came out, the students' depression, worry, and confusion were swept away. They became high-spirited and excited. Conquer them. Enter officialdom. Didn't they study hard for so many years just to change their original fate? These students were the first batch of students in the Golden Scale Academy. There were 100 male students and 100 female students. Including Feng Yi and some other students who got into the class through connections, there were no more than 210 students in this batch. This batch of students were the orphans of fallen soldiers. To put it bluntly, they were common people. Common people were qualified to study for 12 years, and also qualified to be recruited. It was almost an opportunity to change 18 generations of ancestors. For a moment, all the students were eager to try. They were excited and thought that everyone would be conquered. Ji Yunshu had invested 12 years of manpower, resources, and financial resources. How could she waste them? In the end, Nie Sun's next words sent them from the heaven of excitement into the world of confusion. Those who do not pass the graduation examination will either leave the Academy or stay back for a year and continue to participate in the examination with the students of the next level. Everyone, what? There's a test for graduation? Nie Sun said, the graduation assessment is to test the results of your studies in the Academy these years. When you graduate from the Academy will keep the files of your studies in the Academy forever. No matter where you go in the future, you will be a student of the Golden Scale Academy. Each of you represents the Academy and is the face of the Academy. The Academy will not allow students who fail in their studies to go out and ruin the good reputation it has accumulated over the years. Therefore, a graduation test was set up. Only those who passed the test with outstanding results would have the right to graduate and leave. In the future, you will pay. No matter if you are an official, a teacher, or living in a corner, you have to be careful with your words and actions. You can't discredit the academy. He spoke very sternly. The students could feel the power coming from his body and subconsciously became more obedient. The assessment will be set at the end of the first month after the new year. Everyone's expression changed. This was not a chance for people to relax during the new year. Those who pass the graduation assessment can participate in the assessment held by Duke Lanting in May next year. Those who pass can become an official. Nie Sun threw another bomb. Those who compete with you on the same stage are not only your classmates, but also the 85 ladies in the female class and the scholars of the Golden Scale Pavilion. Everyone, don't embarrass the academy. Just do your best. Feng Yi had something to ask. Headmaster, can you tell us the general content of the assessment? Nie Sun said, it will be the 6 arts of a gentleman. There are 6 subjects in total. Everyone, someone said with a trembling voice, the ladies in the female class will also participate? They have also studied hard in the academy for many years. Of course they will participate. Nie Sun sighed in his heart. There should be 100 people in the female class. However, some of the older ones couldn't stand it and chose to marry and have children. Some of them went to the military camp to work hard. The remaining 85 had lost their parents. Their relatives couldn't control them and didn't have the right to decide their souls. These female students also felt that the academy was quieter and safer. They didn't have the thought of marrying, so they stayed in the academy to continue their studies. When Nie Sun said this, everyone wailed in their hearts. There was no other reason. The ladies in the female class were extremely skilled in martial arts. They didn't belong to the category of normal women. Competing with them on the same stage was too much of a bully. However, Headmaster Nie Sun said that the assessment of the 6 arts of a gentleman was etiquette, music, archery, writing, calligraphy, and mathematics. Other than archery and writing, the female class had no advantage in the other subjects. Moreover, as long as it wasn't a face-to-face fight, the results of the male class wouldn't be bad. When they thought of this, everyone's anxious hearts slowly returned to their original place. As long as they didn't fight one-on-one with the ladies in the female class and hurt each other, they still had a chance. Nie Sun saw that the students naturally accepted the fact that the ladies would compete with them on the same stage. He was a little shocked. However, he soon figured it out. This batch of students in the Golden Scale Academy had been living in the academy for more than 10 years. They were isolated from the outside world. The education they received was open, and their thoughts were also open-minded. In addition, during the big classes, they often interacted with and compared with the female class students. In their minds, they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with women being conquered. If someone belittled them in front of them, they would think that person was being ridiculous. This scene was naturally caused by Jiang Qigong. Ji hoped to see it. It was difficult to change the minds of adults, but it was different for children. In order for you to successfully pass the graduation assessment, your studies will be quite arduous. Please don't complain. After being serious for a while, Nie Sun's tone finally softened. There was a hint of a smile on his face. The students muttered in private. What's the big deal about suffering? It's the big deal if you don't pass the assessment. If they didn't pass the assessment, it meant that the results of their 12 years of study wouldn't be recognized. They would have to repeat the year and take the assessment together with the next cohort. It was too embarrassing. Everyone's nerves were stretched taut. They couldn't wait to revise their lessons even in their dreams. #I love learning. Learning makes me happy. The headmasters of the academy were worried that these students would become sick from studying. When the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival began, the headmasters encouraged the students to go out and play for a day or two. Of course, the real reason was Chapter 1754. To the people of Yangzhou, the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was an event of great significance. Jiang? In the first 2 years after Ji took over Xiangyang district, she organized the Lantern Festival in order to quickly restore the livelihood of the people and encourage them to have hope in life. In the following years, Xiangyang district developed better and better. Hundreds of thousands of people came to live there, and the tradition of the Lantern Festival was preserved. Many smart merchants seized the opportunity and imitated Jika House to organize various promotional events. Not only did it arouse the people's desire to shop, but it also increased their sales. The merchants made a lot of money. When other merchants saw this, they were extremely envious. Soon after, they organized some kind of promotional event to benefit the people during the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival. This was somewhat similar to the Double 11 Chopping Festival in the Salted Fish dimension. Every year before New Year's Eve, these events were held. Some diligent and thrifty people developed the habit of stocking up during the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival. Of course, there were many merchants who participated in the event. Some sold fake goods for personal gain, and some even cheated the common people into buying inferior goods at low prices. There were also those who maliciously used price wars to squeeze the living space of their own kind, thereby dominating the market share. Even Jiang? Ji's occupation in her previous life was not related to being a merchant. However, she had come into contact with many people and understood some of the little tricks of the business world. These little tricks were the leftover tricks of the ancestors in her era. However, in this ancient era where business development was still in its infancy, every idea could set off a considerable business storm. In other words, with the advanced business philosophy, even Jiang? Ji did not want to be a vassal and fight for the world. As a merchant, she might be able to create a considerable business empire. Therefore, while promoting business development, the Empress Dowager Ji made many rules to restrict merchants. Many of the regulations were inexplicable to the current merchants. However, over time, as Xiangyang district flourished and its economy far exceeded that of ordinary states, some merchants who had been doing business for a long time figured out some clues. They increasingly felt that the Duke of Lanting was unfathomable. Taking one step at a time was not scary. What was scary was taking 10 steps at a time. They could not afford to offend such a big boss. Time to slip away. Out of fear, they repeatedly restrained themselves and the shops under their name, not daring to overstep the boundaries. Others were not as clear-headed as them. Some of them were black-hearted merchants who would resort to unscrupulous means to earn money. Unfortunately, this was Xiangyang district. The regulations regarding merchants, shops, and commodities were detailed and clear. If one was caught, he would be sacrificed to the heavens. There was basically no hope for him to make a comeback. Once they crossed the line, not only would they face a heavy fine and a year in prison, but they would also be banished from Xiangyang City. Their businesses would no longer be able to do business in Xiangyang City. For merchants, it wasn't a big deal if they could use money to avert disaster. The punishment of being banished and unable to do business was severe. Against the merchants, Jiangyu? Ji was not lenient when it came to collecting taxes. Of course, merchants could also think of ways to evade taxes, but once they were caught, they would not be able to bear the consequences. Even so, there were still countless businessmen who racked their brains to rent shops in Xiangyang City Market. There were many people and business opportunities in Elephant Sun City. The business environment was good and stable, so there was no need to worry about being robbed by bandits. In the past few years, there had been chaos and chaos. The feudal lords and tyrants had imposed exorbitant taxes and levies, and there were even cases of coercion and robbery. As a result, some merchants had gone bankrupt and were unable to continue their business. Even if there were no feudal lords or tyrants, there were bandits and gangsters. Any shop that wanted to do business would have to pay a high protection fee. Not handing it over? Then they would rush forward and loot all the shops. In comparison, Xiangyang City was a paradise for the merchants. Every New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was their carnival. Some merchants from other places also wanted to come and join in the fun. They booked temporary stalls 1 or 2 months in advance and brought their goods over to sell. They came in high spirits and returned in high spirits. While the merchants were happy, some of the scholars and minor landowning families were unhappy. Scholars, farmers, merchants, and merchants were at the bottom. The Lord of Lanting did not respect the scholars, but instead took care of the merchants. Was there something wrong with his brain? That was what he thought, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. After all, this was Jiang. Ji's old nest, her home field. The last person who dared to insult Jiang in public? Those who badmouthed Ji were beaten up by her brainless fans on the way home. The most annoying thing about this person was that after he was beaten, he didn't reflect on himself and instead went to report it to the authorities. In the end, the authorities asked about the whole story and generously gave out 7 days' worth of prison meals. For a large clan like the Feng clan, they were very smart and knew how to protect themselves. Why would they rush to make such a stupid statement? Not only did he not oppose Jiang. Instead, Ji found ways to express her goodwill and earned a lot of benefits from it. For example, the clan leader of the Feng clan. The current clan leader of the Feng clan was Feng Xiu, Feng Jin's eldest brother. He used Feng Jin's connections to cut the queue and rented a few of the best shops in the market. The business scope was very wide. At this time, Feng Jin realized that his clan also had a lot of business. Feng Xiu? He couldn't help but complain. Do you think you grew up eating wind and drinking dew? There were so many people in the main and side branches of the Feng clan. Even if the clan's resources were tilted to the main branch, the large number of side branches also had a lot of expenses. Their living expenses were not bad, but studying and learning to write were the ones that burned money. All of these needed money. Because of the unregulated business in this era, coupled with the influence of the chain of contempt, the landowning families had shops under their names, but most of them followed the rules. Most of their income still depended on the land. They spent a lot of effort to acquire land because there was money to be made in it. Under the constraints of the family tradition, the Feng clan didn't act so arrogantly, but they still had a lot of land under their name, many of which were accumulated by their ancestors. But what about their second brother and Jiang? Ji was bound to them, and the latter had been suppressing the landowning families. If it was in the past, they could probably kill them by gathering the power of the landowning families. Now, they were getting stronger and the landowning families were being weakened. Feng? The eldest brother frowned and realized that things weren't so simple. He discussed with his father, Feng Ren, in private. He didn't know what they said, but they sold a part of the land at a friendship price. This part of the land eventually went to Jiang? Ji's hands were full of fertile land. To return a plum with a peach, they relied on this favor. They also got a shop in a prime location in the market from Feng Jin at a low price. The Feng clan used to have some shops, but the profit was very low. It was not as much as the income from the land, let alone stable. They studied the market and made adjustments. In addition, they sold a part of the land to Jiang? Ji's favor in exchange for preferential treatment. The business was booming, and in the end, they even opened their business to the counties around Xiangyang. The annual income was actually several times the dividends from the land. This business was not a loss. Feng Jin was speechless. Since his eldest brother took over the position of the clan leader, he seemed to have opened the door to a strange world. Huai Zhang, are you still not done? Madam's gentle voice came from outside the house. Feng. He responded, yes, I'm coming. Feng. 4 years after he separated from his first wife, Madame Du, he only remarried when his 2 legitimate sons reached the age of understanding. He didn't have any resistance towards remarrying. The legitimate sons needed a mother to teach them, and the Feng clan also needed a matron. After a failed marriage and a hysterical wife, he didn't have high expectations for his second wife. Instead, he was full of surprises. Chapter 1755. Why are you dressed so plainly today? Feng Gui came out and saw his wife's light makeup. He was not used to it. The culture in Elephant Sun City was very open. Women's makeup was bright and bright. In recent years, there had been great improvements in the dyeing of fabrics. Bright red and purple colors were no longer something that only wealthy families could afford. Walking on the street, the women's clothes were colorful. Among the shops under the Feng family, those that dealt with women and children were the most profitable. Feng Gui was not a pedantic person. Bright colors were the trend now. Naturally, he would not stop his wife from pursuing the trend. But, ever since she married into the family, she had been cautious. Her jewelry, makeup, and clothes were all plain and old-fashioned. It was fine on a normal day, but it was bustling outside today. It was only right for her to dress up in a festive manner. Feng Gue sent his wife a lot of jewelry and makeup. Unfortunately, she only used them in her room and refused to see anyone. His wife smiled. It's not good to dress too brightly. I'm worried that people will gossip. Feng Gue replied, What's there to gossip about? His wife smiled and did not speak. Feng Gue frowned and remembered that he was married twice. So was his wife. Although Feng Gue was the leader of the Feng family and the Feng family seemed to be in the right position in these troubled times, it was not a problem for them to maintain their former glory. However, he still had a pair of legitimate sons. Moreover, his wife did not die, but he had a peaceful divorce. His biological mother was still alive. With such conditions, even with the halo of his family background, he did not fare well in the marriage market of the aristocratic families. The aristocratic families disdained marrying their legitimate daughters. Even if Feng Gue was clean and had no concubines, and his personal conditions were not bad, his daughter would be the mother of his second child. In the future, when they had children, they would have 3 legitimate sons. If they did not inherit the family name, they would be at a disadvantage. Small families would like to have a piece of this pie, but the Feng matriarch had high standards. They could not match up to him. In the end, old Madame Feng's hair was about to turn white from worry. Just when Feng Gue said that he would continue to be single, he actually found a suitable candidate. This candidate was not bad either. His family background was noble. His father was a great scholar and his mother was from a prominent family. At the age of 15, he was engaged to a scholar from an aristocratic family. That's right, Feng Gue knew this scholar. They had been friends since a long time ago. When the scholar got married, Feng Gue had even sent him a congratulatory gift. Unfortunately, this guy was a short-lived ghost. After getting married for less than a month, he wanted to have fun. When he went out for a horse race, he was thrown off his horse and trampled to death. He left behind his beautiful but childless wife as a widow. At that time, the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was in vogue. She was forced to return to her parents' home because of rumors of her husband's curse. Feng Gue had even gone to the scholar's funeral to offer his condolences and lamented for a few days. He did not expect that after a few years, he would marry his wife. Understood, smiley face, angle, underscore no matter what, Feng Gue really liked this madam, especially when he had his first wife as a comparison. What's there to be afraid of? Don't tell me they'll gossip in front of you. I'm afraid they don't know how to spell the word death, said Feng Gue. A few days ago, didn't your mansion purchase a new batch of winter clothes? I think that primrose color is not bad. I remember that you also made 2 new headwear? After all, she was the matriarch of the Feng family. Her wealth couldn't be summed up with the words, having a mine at home. How could she dress as shabbily as a small family? The madam looked at Feng Gue helplessly. In the end, she couldn't argue with him. She went back and changed her clothes. She also changed her makeup. It had to be said that the fresh colors and bright makeup had a great visual impact. Just by standing there, she was eye-catching. While Feng Gue waited for his wife, he played mahjong with his 2 sons. He couldn't help but blame Lanting Gong, Jiangpingji. She had too many playthings. Speaking of which, wasn't she fighting a war outside? How did she have the time to do these things? Perhaps Feng Gue's wife had been a widow for too long. She couldn't get used to such bright colors, especially when people were looking at her. However, when she saw that the women on the streets were dressed more brightly than her nervousness gradually dissipated. The New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was held in the largest markets and business districts in Xiangyang district. Every year, red lanterns would be hung high in front of every house. The street lights were bright and people were weaving in and out. Other than the usual activities such as guessing lantern riddles and drawing colorful lanterns, there were also a variety of new entertainment activities. For example, the official theatrical troupe would put on a stage to perform on that day. Basically, they were all popular and festive plays. One could watch them with a cheap ticket. Of course, the Lantern Festival also included eating and drinking. Under the leadership of Jiangpingji, the unreliable feudal lord, Xiangyang district was very enthusiastic about the development of delicacies. Although there were some dark dishes, most of them were delicious. They were easy and quick to prepare and were very suitable for roadside stalls. How attractive would the New Year's Eve Lantern Festival be? Along the way, Feng Gui saw many familiar faces. These people were the ones who criticized Jiang Pingji the most. Yesterday, one of them even criticized Jiang Pingji for placing too much emphasis on merchants and putting the cart before the horse. However, although their mouths weren't honest, their bodies were quite honest. Feng Gui greeted the other party from a distance. The other party smiled awkwardly but politely. Even the gentry would come out to join in the fun, not to mention the other commoners. Feng Gui wouldn't imitate the commoners and eat while walking, but he still bought some and found a nearby private room to slowly enjoy his meal. Uncle, Auntie. Feng Gui had just entered the inn with his wife and servants when he heard Changxing's call. Turning his head to look, he saw his second brother, Feng Yi, standing beside Changxing. There were also a few other youths who looked either familiar or unfamiliar. Based on their temperament, most likely they weren't commoners. They were probably classmates who were on good terms with the academy. Changxing whispered something to the others and brought Feng Yi forward to greet them. "Why don't I see my two cousins?" Feng Gui replied, "They're getting old, how can they still be restrained?" They accepted a friend's invitation to go out and have fun. Although his two sons had been led astray by his first wife, Feng Gui brought them up personally and then threw them into the Golden Scale Academy to train them. In the end, he managed to turn them around. The trauma of their childhood didn't seem to have left any lasting effects on them. Now that they stood out, they were the standard descendants of the Feng family. Feng Gui also heard that his two sons had stayed up all night fighting for the Golden Scale Academy's graduation examination. He felt very gratified. Striking a balance between work and rest was the right way. They had studied too hard recently. Taking advantage of the festival, they should go out and meet their friends and relax a little. Of course, the real reason wasn't known to outsiders. Feng Gui felt that his wife was still young. If he brought his sons out, he was afraid that others would misunderstand as a father bringing his son and daughter-in-law smiley face, angle, I heard from Brother Wang Lin that my two cousins have been very tired recently. Uncle should talk to them and tell them not to push themselves too hard. Feng Gui's two sons' talents could only be considered average. They were also the oldest in their cohort, so naturally, they were under a lot of pressure. If they were to be held back, where would the Feng family's reputation go? Feng Gui nodded in agreement. The Feng family had always been like this. When they were young, they held on tightly. When they grew up, they basically didn't care. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a weirdo like Feng Ju. His own sons, he really should show more concern for them. After chatting idly for a while, Feng Gui let Changxing go out and have fun. With an elder by her side, the youngsters wouldn't be able to enjoy themselves. Today was a suitable day to bump into acquaintances. Feng Gui had just started criticizing his third brother, Feng Ju. When he went upstairs, he saw him. Feng Ju and his second brother, Feng Jin, were staring at each other. Chapter 1756. Feng Gui's words were not an exaggeration. Feng Ju seemed to have been avoiding his two elder brothers for the past few years. As long as it was an occasion where Feng Gui and Feng Jin were present, this fellow would never appear. There were some situations where he really couldn't avoid them, so he simply used the excuse of visiting friends and relatives, or simply claimed to be ill and stayed at home. Feng Gui felt that it was pointless. What was the point of the three brothers quarreling like this? Feng Jin thought so too. Was there any obstacle between brothers that could not be overcome? Besides, it was a chaotic world now. It was already not easy for the three of them to survive. Look at the other brothers, they were basically separated by life and death. He had even crossed the threshold of life and death. Was there any contradiction in this world that was more difficult to cross than the difference between life and death? Look at Sir Cheng Cheng's two sons. The eldest son, Cheng Sun, hung himself on the crooked tree that was Su Bei. When Su Bei was defeated, he committed suicide to follow him. Looking at Wei Si's elder brother, Wei Dan, it was said that he treated Wei Si like a brother and a father. Their brotherly relationship was deep, but in the end, he also chose to commit suicide after being defeated. The two brothers, Meng Heng and Yasun, were still alive. However, they had fought against each other and plotted against each other to kill each other. After witnessing so many parting of life and death, what knot in his heart could not be untied? At the end of the day, it was all Huang Song's fault. Back then, Huang Song had abducted Feng Ju right in front of Huang Song. This delay had lasted for more than 10 years. At the thought of this, Feng Jin's hatred for Huang Song deepened. Unfortunately, Huang Song had signed an oath of alliance with Jiang Pingji, which was equivalent to a protective talisman. Feng Jin could not touch him. Feng Ju was still watching from the side. If Feng Jin really made a move, it would be even worse. At the end of the day, Feng Jin had suffered quite a bit because he was afraid of harming the innocent. When Feng Gui came up, Feng Jin and Feng Ju, who had been staring at each other, felt increasingly uncomfortable. It was as if they had not expected to meet under such circumstances. Fortunately, they were still rational. They maintained an awkward but polite smile and stiffly bowed to their elder brother and sister-in-law. Feng Gui coughed lightly. His voice sounded unnatural. Everyone's here today. Indeed, they hadn't even gathered for the new year a few years ago. Feng Gui had thought that they would never see each other again. Did you come out together, or did you just happen to bump into each other? Why didn't you bring someone along? What's the point of being alone on such a lively day? The Lunar New Year's Eve Lantern Festival was supposed to be spent with family. If these two left their wives and children at home and went out to enjoy themselves, it would be too much of a jerk. If it weren't for the Feng family's background and the genetic buff, with their EQ, they would have been alone forever. Feng Gui chose a mat and sat down. Feng Jin said, Jing Xian has an appointment with sister-in-law. Jin doesn't like crowds, so I'll wait here. Feng Ju nodded in agreement, but his expression was a little stiff. I see. Feng Gui nodded his head. It looked like his two younger brothers weren't hopeless after all. I heard that younger sister-in-law is busy with government affairs and it's rare for her to have a chance to relax. Third sister-in-law, since you're shopping with her, you must enjoy yourself to the fullest. After all, we're family. We can't distance ourselves from each other. These words were not only directed at Wei Jingxian's sisters-in-law, but also hinted at his two younger brothers to end their childish conflict. Speaking of which, it was strange. The three brothers of the Feng clan usually didn't see each other, but the wives of the three were close friends. However, Wei Jingxian was currently working for the government and didn't have much free time. Instead, it was Feng Gui's wife who was closer to Feng Ju's wife. As soon as Feng Ju finished speaking, the other two brothers agreed awkwardly. Initially, it was Feng Jin and Feng Ju staring at each other. Now, it was the three brothers staring at each other. The air was filled with an atmosphere that made one feel awkward. Feng Gui's wife had been able to maintain a warm smile at first, but under the pressure of the three brothers' awkward auras, she gradually lost her smile. Finally, Feng Gui put on the attitude of an older brother and asked about Feng Jin's recent work situation. No matter how awkward the topic was, it was better than the three of them staring at each other in silence. As the saying goes, an older brother is like a father. When Feng Gui was young, he took good care of his younger brother's studies. It was normal for him to be concerned about work when he grew up. Feng Jin's work was naturally smooth sailing. In the years that Jiang Pingji was at the front lines, he had lived a comfortable life. Without his lord, who would occasionally come up with all sorts of weird ideas to torture the people around her, he would secretly laugh in his bed at night. After speaking about Feng Jin, Feng Gui wanted to show some concern for his youngest brother. Feng Ju was the father of two children. Even if it was for the sake of his wife and children, he should reconsider his life. Admittedly, Feng Ju wouldn't starve to death even if he stayed at home. After all, he was still a direct descendant of the Feng family. As his eldest brother, Feng Gui would provide for his family. Even if Feng Gui was unwilling to provide for them, Feng Ju was also a rich man. His private treasury was very rich. It wouldn't be a problem for him to eat and drink until he died. However, Feng Ju was the father of two children. Did he really want to set such a decadent image and role model for his children? Feng Ju was still a dead pig that didn't fear boiling water. His eldest brother's words went in one ear and came out the other. He listened attentively and refused to repent. The more Feng Jin listened, the angrier he got. If not for his good manners, he really wanted to give his younger brother a beating and beat the water out of his brain. What kind of bewitching potion did that scoundrel Huang Song feed his younger brother? Huang Song couldn't even turn over a new leaf, yet Feng Ju still wanted to hang himself from this crooked tree. But the reality was, Feng Gui sighed. There's no one else here today. Huijia, why don't you tell me what you think? Why would you rather waste your time than pull yourself together? Feng Ju said, how can you know the happiness of a fish if you're not a fish? You're not me, how can you know what I'm planning? Feng Gui and Feng Jin stared at their younger brother with a death stare. Such a troublesome younger brother, they should just beat him to death. Feng Jin suppressed his anger. What kind of plans do you have now? Must you learn from Qing Jing and become a teacher in the academy? Is it better to teach and educate people? Although Qing Jing was also unwilling to become an official, he was unwilling to do so for himself and his fellow disciples from the same sect as Langya. He wasn't wasting his time teaching in the academy either. Every day, he was enriching himself with learning. On the other hand, what about Feng Ju? Feng Jin hoped that his younger brother would go and teach as well. But on second thought, his children would also be studying in the academy in the future. If they really let Feng Ju, this traitorous scammer, teach them, that would really be misleading their children. Feng Jin was a kind and honest person. He couldn't bring up such an unkind suggestion. In the face of his two older brothers' threat of, if you don't tell us the truth, we'll gang up on you and beat you up, Feng Ju finally compromised a little. His eyes darkened and he let out a sigh. One look and it was obvious that this was the prelude to a long speech. There are some things that you don't know. It's not that I don't like Lu Shi, I'm just a little confused. What confused? Feng Jin wasn't going to listen to his youngest brother's nonsense. This fellow spent his days eating, drinking, and having fun. He followed Huang Song everywhere. Was there any place in the entire Xiangyang district that they hadn't wandered? Not to mention Xiangyang district, they had wandered the entire Wanzhou. Feng Jin had never seen such an impudent defeated feudal lord. Confused? He thought that Feng Ju was feigning ignorance. I'm thinking, is this person Lu Shi or someone else? Feng Jin and Feng Gui were prepared to answer their younger brother's doubts. They didn't expect to hear this. That's it? That's it? Feng Ju spread his hands and said, that's it. That's it. Feng Jin was speechless. Chapter 1757. Feng Ju's desire to live was still very strong. Faced with the death stares of his two brothers, he revealed a little of the content. In the end, it stemmed from a dream. What dream? Feng Jin suppressed his anger. This mischievous child had always believed that man could conquer nature. He did not believe in feudalism at all. As long as it was related to numerology, he had always been dismissive. Why was he talking about a dream now and being confused for a long time? Feng Ju said, a dream related to Lu Shi. Feng Jin held his breath. He was afraid that his brother would say something profane. What good could come from a grown man dreaming of another woman? If it was any other woman, it would not be a problem even if they had a dream. However, it was different when the other party was his lord. It was as serious as the beginning of the investiture of the gods, where King Zhou, or to be precise, Emperor Xinzi wrote obscene poems about Nuwa. Of course, since it was a romance, it was a made-up story. Even though it was full of flaws and bugs, the plot was good and the content was novel. Feng Jin was still a fan of the novelist's book. He would always catch up on the latest chapter. King Zhou took liberties with Nuwa and destroyed the Shang dynasty. If Feng Ju revealed his dream about Jiang Pingji, the Feng family would probably be devastated. Fortunately, this mischievous child was not so insensible. Nonsense. Feng Ju said, it's very strange. The Lu Shi in the dream was not called Lu Shi. Her surname was Jiang and her name was Peng. She was called Pingji. Hearing this beginning, Feng Jin felt a little hopeless. Had her younger brother read too many romance stories in the novelist's novels? What he thought about in the day was what he dreamed about at night. How could he possibly have an earth-shattering romance with goddesses with all kinds of personas? Yes, there were such stories in the market. Even though the goddesses had various personas and there was no innuendo, it could not change the core. The domineering queen fell in love with the stubborn, kind, intelligent, and virtuous scholar, Tom Su. Feng Jin still did not understand how this kind of rubbish romance passed through Wei Si's review. Could it be because of resonance? Feng Gue said nonchalantly, "It's just a dream." Feng Ju said, "Was it really a dream? It's too real. Everything I've experienced in my dream is as distant as the clouds in the sky, yet it's within reach." Feng Gue asked, "What's the specific content? Do you want to look for Master Yuanjing to ease your mind?" Feng Ju said, "That Jiang family and the current Lu Shi, their temperaments are similar, but also different. Their appearance is similar, and their background is the same, but it shouldn't be like this. Even though there are only a few fragmented scenes in the dream, I feel very different." Feng Ju had only had that dream once. Even though it was only once, the details of the dream were deeply engraved in his mind. It was completely different from his usual dreams. It was this uniqueness that caught Feng Ju's attention. He was so bored that he began to analyze the difference between dreams and reality. The more he analyzed, the more confused he became, and the more confused he became, the deeper he sank into the mire. At the same time, he also discovered many things that he had never discovered before. For a period of time, he almost couldn't tell the difference between reality and dream. Before sorting out these messy things, it was impossible for him to become an official, not for anything else, but because he couldn't get over the hurdle in his heart. Even if he did, he didn't know if he had the courage to become an official. In his dream, he met Madame Jiang. In a fit of pique, he ran away from home and encountered a predicament. He entered a bandit's lair and met the bandit leader, Madame Jiang. In his dream, Madame Jiang was a bandit, and she had the air of a bandit. She often killed people with a sneer. In order to save his life, Feng Ju could only change his name to Feng San and become her incompetent advisor for a few months. Smiley face. Angle. In the dream, he was quite rational at first. Later, he didn't know what was wrong with him. After drinking a few bottles of wine, he heard that the other party was going to do something big and overturn the universe. His blood surged, and he shouted that he would use force to cut off the focus of this chaotic world. To sum it up, the two of them drank for a whole night and roared at the moon like crazy people. No, that was crazy. From the perspective of a third party, Feng Ju clearly saw the hidden shrewdness in Madame Jiang's eyes after he changed his name to Feng San in the dream. Wake up, this guy knew Feng Ju's identity from the beginning and deliberately dragged him into a trap. Because the dream was seriously fragmented, Feng Ju could only sort out a general direction. They became close friends by chance, but they were destined to go astray. When he saw Madame Jiang wearing the fur coat that represented the emperor and wearing the 12 crowns on her head to ascend to the throne, Feng Ju could also feel the excitement and joy in his heart. It was as if all the depression that had been squeezed in his chest had been released, and his heart was surging. However, this was not a fairy tale. It was impossible for it to stop abruptly at the most beautiful moment. As Madame Jiang ascended to the throne and took control of the world, the two of them, who used to talk about everything, still had a disagreement. The source of the disagreement was the Feng family, or rather, the topic of scholars and commoners. Looking at himself in the dream, Feng Ju was a little stunned. It turned out that he also had such a side to him. After some fragmented scenes appeared, Feng Ju finally understood why he was so protective of the Feng family in the dream. Feng Ju was the only one left in the direct line of descent of the Feng family. He had no right to be willful and could only carry the entire direct line. For the interests of the Feng family, he argued with the emperor and did things that he once thought he would never do. Gradually, the decades of friendship were exhausted. The Feng family lost 2 elder brothers, and the Feng Ju in the dream became the person he once hated the most. It was hard to say whether the emperor had let down the Feng Ju in the dream, or Feng Ju had gone against the original intentions of the two of them. According to the dream, the cause of the death of the two elder brothers seemed to be indirectly related to the emperor and himself. Well, it was probably when they were vying for the throne. This was also the reason why Fengju was unwilling to face his two elder brothers all these years. One was enough to make him feel guilty, but two was simply a critical hit. Fengjin could not help but complain. "You took the dream seriously." Fengju said uncertainly, "The dream is too real. Maybe there really is a past life, this life, and karma?" According to the fragmented dream, the Jiang family and Lu Shi had a common characteristic. They were not outstanding before the age of 12, but after the age of 12, they amazed the world with a single brilliant feat. Each of them was more troublesome than the other. The Lu Shi he knew was still okay, but the Jiang family in the dream was really out of line. She became a bandit and rose to the throne. She even shot her biological father at the city gate. Yet, such a rebellious character, sigh, it seemed to be more in line with the brat Fengju's taste. Cuff, this was not the point. The point was that Fengju asked the master if there was a possibility of possession. In the end, the master rolled his eyes at him, pointed to the sky, and said, "A noble son has fallen from heaven. Mortals do not speak of heaven's secrets. Be careful not to get yourself into trouble." That meant it was possible? However, there was no proof. Fengju could only keep this secret and let it rot. Possession by demons and ghosts was called mischief, but how could it be called possession by a noble son sent by heaven? It was King Destiny. Fengju vaguely mentioned the relationship between himself and the Jiang family in the dream. Fengjin gave him a look. If it was really a past life, wouldn't Fengju be in a hurry to become an official? "What are you blabbering about?" The two of them continued their predestined relationship. What a good plot in a novel. Fengju could not help but sigh. Lu Shi is not the Jiang family. The Fengju in the dream was the first white moon of the Jiang family. They were fair-weather friends. The Lu Shi in reality? This woman was too sentimental. Chapter 1758. What do you mean by, Lu Shi is not part of the Jiang family? Feng Gui had the illusion that he was going bald from worry. His brother's illness seemed to have worsened. He went straight to the point and asked, "Huijie, tell me, what exactly do you think of the Duke of Lanting?" Fengju himself could not explain it clearly. Rationally, he was more inclined towards Huang Song. Even if Huang Song had already been defeated and lost his lofty ambitions, he and Fengju had been friends for more than 10 years, and they still maintained contact even now. On the other hand, Fengju was not familiar with the current Duke of Lanting, Lu Shi, let alone his position in Fengju's heart. However, when he recalled that frighteningly realistic dream, the usually decisive Fengju became uncertain again. The Fengju in the dream had initially given his all for the Jiang family. That dedication was even greater than what he felt for the current Huang Song. A ridiculous dream could actually have such a huge impact on Fengju. The Duke of Lanting is naturally good. If he ascends to the throne in the future, he will definitely create an unprecedented prosperous dynasty. As Fengju said this, fragmented scenes from the dream surfaced in his mind. The dynasty under the rule of the Jiang family was indeed very prosperous. The current Duke of Lanting, Lu Shi, would naturally be able to achieve that. However, there are some things that I can't explain clearly. Isn't it not bad now? When Feng Gui heard this, he really wanted to open a hole in his brother's head and open it up to see what kind of trash was inside. What did he mean by, "Isn't it bad now"? What the hell, how is it not bad? Did he mean that he would stay at home all day and live off his parents and family? The Feng family had used a lot of resources to nurture him. They didn't expect him to be extremely powerful, but he couldn't just stay at home and live off his parents, right? Oh, old Master Feng Ren had even retired. Currently, Fengju was living off his eldest brother, Feng Ge. When Feng Gui thought about how he had to take care of his youngest brother's family while he was busy with family affairs, he felt terrible. It would be very embarrassing if word got out. The third son of the Feng family had been known as a child prodigy since he was young, but after he grew up, he became mediocre. Did Fengju want to become a classic example of what people said, growing up is not necessarily good? Since it's so good, why are you still? Don't tell me you still think that Huang Bogeo can make a comeback? Feng Jin's eyes were sharp. It was as if Feng Ju dared to nod, he would chop Huang Song with a knife and let his corpse lie on the street. As an introverted brother complex, Feng Jin had never liked Huang Song back then. Even if Huang Song tried to please him, he would not budge. Now, he hated Huang Song even more. Feng Ju was shocked and hurriedly said, "Elder brother, what are you talking about? If these words reach the ears of the Duke of Lanting, Bogeo will be in trouble." Huang Song had already given up. If Jiang Pingji became suspicious because of Feng Jin's words, that would be a tragedy. Feng Jin frowned and looked at his youngest brother with a pained expression. "You are a beautiful woman, yet you follow a thief. Huang Song was a scumbag, okay?" Feng Ju did not know that his second brother was imagining so many things, so he had no choice but to lie. "Now is not the time. Look, this excuse is exactly the same as the one Qingjing used back then." Feng Jin asked, "When is the time?" Feng Ju was quick-witted and immediately thought of a way to cover up the lie. With a solemn expression, he said, "I was unwilling to become an official in the past because of my old friendship with Bogeo. Moreover, I did not have much contact with the Duke of Lanting, so I planned to wait and see. Now I am still unwilling, because I am worried about something." Both of his brothers had brother complex filters. They did not see that Feng Ju was prevaricating. Instead, they asked him with a serious face, "What are you worried about?" Feng Ju said, "You are highly regarded by the Duke of Lanting, and you have a youthful friendship." Feng Jin interrupted him. "If it is because of this, you don't have to worry. Will you and I care about this?" He thought that Feng Ju said this because he was worried that the two brothers would have a conflict in the future. They were of the same clan and had deep feelings for each other. They should support each other instead of opposing each other. "That is not what I mean. I am saying that you are highly regarded by the Duke of Lanting. If he wants to recommend me to become an official, he can do it at any time. There is no hurry." Feng Ju shook his head and denied Feng Jin's words. He said, "I am worried that the Duke of Lanting's actions in the future will go against the original intentions of the Feng family. If that is the case, when the time comes, it will be too late for you to retreat. Why should I get involved in this mess? It is better to wait and see first. When the situation has stabilized, I will see what her intentions are. I am not in a hurry to become an official." According to the dream fragment, the Feng Ju in the dream had indeed walked a different path from the emperor. Feng Jin vaguely knew what his younger brother was talking about. He frowned. At this moment, Feng Gui spoke. "I will take care of the family matters. Why do you need to worry about it?" When Feng Gui said this, he exuded the aura of an elder. Not only was he the elder brother of his two younger brothers, he was also their clan leader. How the family would develop in the future and what path to take were Feng Gui's worries. At the moment, it was not his two younger brothers' turn to overstep their bounds. Feng Gui was afraid that if he spoke too harshly, his two younger brothers would misunderstand and become distant from him. He added, "As long as I am around, the Feng family will not make things difficult for you. Unless there was an irreconcilable conflict between the survival of the family and his two younger brothers, Feng Gui would always support his younger brothers in their endeavors. He was the elder brother, the clan leader, and most importantly, their backing." When Feng Ju heard these words, a warm current flowed through his heart. It was as if this promise had transcended the barriers of time and space and was as precious as crossing mountains and rivers. He could not help but think of Feng Ju in his dream. That white-haired Feng Ju had sighed more than once. If his two elder brothers were still alive, they would not have reached this stage. Feng Ju was intelligent, but he was not suited to be the leader of the Shi clan. His personality was also not that sophisticated. He was unable to find a balance between the emperor and the Shi clan. If it had been Feng Gui, with this elder brother's temperament and methods, the Feng family would have been able to remain calm regardless of the storm outside. "Big brother," Feng Ju's voice was slightly muffled. That call was dragged out and sounded like he was acting coquettishly. Feng Gui did not fall for this. With a cold expression, he asked, "What other concerns do you have? Tell me all at once." Feng Ju, Wait a minute, now was not the time to be touched? The last one is a little hard to say, it's not convenient to elaborate. Feng Ju revealed a rare look of embarrassment. Feng Gui and Feng Ju's alarm went off. Wait a minute, what the hell was this look of a young man in love? Feng Jin's mind immediately imagined the scene of his younger brother being pressed onto the ground and ravaged by Wei Ci while his lord cheered him on from the side. Hence, Feng Jin said very sternly, Huaijie, no matter how willful you are, there is a limit. You have a family, you must not do anything that will ruin the family's reputation. Was he courting death? He had a wife, a son, and a daughter, yet he dared to cheat on his lord mentally. Did he think of his lord as a lowly person? If Feng Ju dared to have such thoughts, Wei Ci did not have to do anything. Feng Jin would first beat his younger brother to death and bury him on the spot so that his mother could give birth to another one. Feng Ju? He only wanted to be friends with Lanting and get to know each other better. How was that ruining the family's reputation? Chapter 1759. After making such an embarrassing mistake, Feng Ju's strong desire to live came into play. He was just short of patting his chest and explaining to his two brothers that he had no romantic feelings for Jiang Pingji. Not to mention him, even Feng Ju in the dream only regarded the Jiang clan as a monarch and close friend, okay? Regardless of whether it was the Jiang family in his dream or the Duke of Lanting in reality, both were powerful figures worthy of respect. He only admired and yearned for powerful figures. He would never blaspheme them with the narrow-minded feelings of a man and a woman. Even if the dream was very fragmented, Feng Ju could feel that in the dream, he regarded the Jiang family as his only close friend and deity. He could not wait to worship them, so how could he have the delusion of being an ordinary person? No man in this world would have the guts to be lovey-dovey with her and have children with her, okay? Feng Ju was so sure that he managed to calm his two brothers down. If there's a chance in the future, I'll recommend you to the Lord. Don't let me down. It's rare for us to gather together today, and it's so lively outside. Let's not talk about these serious matters. Seeing that Feng Ju's expression did not look too good, Feng Gui took the opportunity to change the topic. Huayu, just now I saw Changxing and the kid from Feng Zisher's family downstairs. Do you know about it? Her brother was an introverted and dull sibling complex. At the same time, he was also a misogynist. Changxing was raised in Feng Jin's arms. He didn't get close to his legitimate son. In the blink of an eye, so many years had passed, and the child was about to get married. This time, it was Feng Jin's turn to scowl. He said, "A grown girl can't be kept at home. She's already engaged, so let them do as they please." Feng Go smiled and said, "Although Feng Zisher isn't much, his only son is excellent." His family background was a little poor, but he treated Changxing well, and the elders had nothing to say. In the Feng clan, other than the Feng clan, which had high requirements for family background, the other branches had even higher requirements for character, appearance, talent, and knowledge. Feng Jin seemed to have thought of something and his lips curled into a smile. "That's true." Feng Ju said, "Perhaps Big Brother doesn't know this, but the children of Feng Zisher's family are indeed interesting, and quite to my liking." Feng Gui was speechless. It would have been fine if his youngest brother hadn't mentioned it, but the moment he did, he was stunned. How could Feng Yi be a gentleman if the brat, Feng Ju, said something to his liking? Feng Ju added, "Just now, that child made a promise to Changxing. If Feng Zisher knew about it, he would probably go crazy from anger." Feng Gui asked, "What promise?" Feng Ju said, "I don't know what Changxing said to his friend, but the kid from the Feng family said that when the two of them have children in the future, the boy will take his father's surname and the girl will take her mother's surname. Nowadays, other than women's families or those who marry into the family, no one else would let their children take their mother's surname. Although it was said that the daughter had to follow her mother's surname, outsiders would still gossip and say that Feng Yi had married into the family of someone of a higher status." Feng Jin said, "A few kids who don't know their place." Although the current atmosphere was more open and there was nothing wrong with a man and a woman getting along with each other, the two of them were shameless enough to talk about this before they were even married. I don't know where Changsheng heard about double households. She told Rong Li that she wanted to have her own household after she got married. Later, she said that it was meaningless to be the head of a single household, so Rong Li promised his daughter to follow her mother's surname. Most importantly, he had not married his daughter off yet. These two scoundrels were already discussing whether they would have a boy or a girl in the future and what the child's surname would be. Feng Jin could not help but reflect on where his family's education had gone wrong. How could they have raised such a bold daughter? Feng Gui laughed. Children's words carry no harm. It was obvious that Feng Gui did not take the matter seriously. Instead, he took it as a joke. Little did he know that the two youngsters were serious. As a loyal brother, Feng Yi could not let the unlucky son Lan fight alone. He should at least show some support. As a student taught by the Golden Scale Academy, Feng Yi did not have the bad habit of despising women or clinging to the family line. After all, the environment in which they grew up was relatively isolated. The academy isolated them from the outside world's influence. Whatever the Golden Scale Academy taught them, they learned it. Coincidentally, Changsheng was joking with him, so he agreed to it. However, some ugly things had to be said first. It was difficult for his family to continue the family line. If there was only one daughter in the future, she might have to change her surname back to Feng. Feng Yi was young, but his thoughts were very mature. He would definitely be able to fulfill the promise he made. Changsheng laughed and pounced on him. In that case, I've profited greatly. Feng Yi caught it. How so? Changsheng replied, I had good taste when I was young. I picked a good man that was 1 in a million. Young aristocratic girls of the same age were married off blindly by their parents. But she was very lucky. Other than the 2 years when Feng Yi left to follow the army, she could see him every day. If they had not settled on this earlier, who knew how popular Feng Yi would be now? Feng Yi also said, in that case, I should be the luckiest. When the two youngsters had enough of being clingy, Feng Yi received her father's black face. You unfilial son. Feng Zhen's face was as black as a sheet. Halfway through, he met Feng Jin. When he heard that his son had promised his granddaughter to someone else, he felt a pain in the ass. Feng Yi jumped to avoid her father's attack. Father, why are you so angry? Feng Zhen asked if what Feng Jin said was true. Feng Yi nodded without hesitation. Feng Zhen gritted his teeth and said, You're really promising. Feng Yi did not reply. Feng Zhen continued, Aren't you afraid that someone will criticize you in the future and say that you married into the family? Their mouths are on their faces. How can a son control them? Feng Yi said, Unless father doesn't agree? No one knew that as the future imperial censor, Feng Yi would be lucky if he did not find people to criticize. Who would dare to criticize him in private? Feng Zhen was furious. He was not a pedantic person. If he had a grandson, it would not be unacceptable for his granddaughter to take her mother's surname. After all, the Feng family was a large family. If she took the surname Feng, her future marriage background would be more powerful. The problem was, what if I only have one daughter? Feng Zhen's health was not good, and Feng Yi was born weak and sickly. It was hard to say whether it would be difficult to have children. Feng Yi smiled and said, Changsheng is not unreasonable. If I only have one daughter, I will change my surname back. Feng Zhen, what were the brains of the youngsters these days thinking? Feng Yi continued, if father is really worried about the family line in 100 years, why not have another child with mother while you're still young? Feng Zhen's face darkened. He wanted to punch his own son. How could he tease his father's son like this? How could he have children so easily? How could Feng Yi be the only child? Just as the father and son were stabbing each other's hearts, hurried footsteps came from outside the room. It was Wan Xiu's maid. Master, Langjin, it's bad. Madam has fainted. Not only that, they also found some brown on Wan Xiu's lower body. But according to the time, it was not yet time for her monthly cycle. What? The father and son did not care about anything else. They hurriedly called the doctor over. The doctor's expression was solemn. After feeling the pulse for a long time, he shook his head and changed to another method. Feng Zhen and his son were frightened. After a long time, Feng Zhen was so anxious that he was sweating. The doctor withdrew his hand and asked the maid about Wan Xiu's period. After a long time. Chapter 1760. What do you mean I can't feel her pulse for now? Feng Zhen almost went crazy when he heard the word, pregnant, but the doctor's next words hit him hard. No one would complain about having too many children. After so many years, he was a father again. He was both happy and nervous, not knowing what to do. Poor medical knowledge told Feng Zhen that a woman's slippery pulse was pregnancy. The doctor said he couldn't feel her pulse, but then said she might be pregnant. He was confused. The slippery pulse is smooth, like a pearl rolling on a jade plate. The doctor had a good temper and explained patiently, usually, if a woman's pulse is slippery and she is not sick, then she is most likely pregnant. But slippery pulse only appears around 2 months of pregnancy, and it can't be felt if the month is too early. I asked the maids and learned that your wife's monthly letters are always on time, never late or early. But this month's letter was a few days late. There was some brown blood on her lower body, but it didn't seem like a monthly letter. So I concluded that she might be pregnant, but the month is too early and she is tired, so there are signs of miscarriage. To be safe, you should rest in bed for the next few days and drink something to protect the fetus. After a few days, we'll see if your wife's letter comes. The doctor didn't say too much, only saying it was possible. The slippery pulse couldn't be the only indicator of pregnancy, because a man full of qi and blood could also feel it. Feng Zhen's brain stopped working and he stood there blankly. If the letter comes in a few days, the doctor said, then it's not pregnancy. I will come again to feel your pulse and prescribe some medicine for your wife. A woman's letter cannot be ignored. If it ends too early or is messed up, it will easily cause the yin and yang in the body to be out of balance, causing puffiness, premature aging, and even a decrease in lifespan. Feng Zhen's mind was a mess after hearing this. Then is she pregnant or not? Feng Yi couldn't stand it anymore. Regardless of whether she is or not, let the doctor prescribe her medicine first. After all, if they didn't take good care of her, they might lose their long-awaited child. Feng Zhen was enlightened by his son and hurriedly said to the doctor, yes, yes, yes. Quickly prescribe the medicine, the best medicine. The doctor was used to big storms and didn't take Feng Zhen's loss of composure to heart. When prescribing the medicine, Feng Zhen avoided his son, Feng Yi, and asked the doctor in a low voice. My wife had a child in the past, but she was tricked by a scoundrel into drinking a poisonous substance that caused her to have an abortion. Her vitality was greatly damaged, which worsened her condition of having a cold womb. If she really is pregnant this time, will it harm her body? Feng Zhen's brows were tightly furrowed, as if he was hesitating about something. It was true that Feng Zhen hoped for his legitimate son, but he also didn't want anything to happen to Wan Xiu. If he was really obsessed with having children, he wouldn't have only had Feng Yi for so many years. Your wife's body is indeed weaker than ordinary people, but it's not a problem for her to be pregnant. When I took your pulse just now, I found that the cold air in your wife's body was almost completely removed. It should have something to do with the years of meticulous care and recuperation. However, the doctor paused for a moment. Feng Zhen asked, but what? Don't keep me guessing. However, if I really get pregnant this time, I must keep it. A woman having a miscarriage is very harmful to her body and vitality, especially when your wife has accidentally eaten something poisonous. If she were to have another miscarriage, her body and bones might not be able to bear it. If she can't keep this child, the chances of having another child in the future are very slim. On the other hand, if she can successfully give birth and recuperate well after the birth, it can eliminate the hidden dangers in her body. Hearing the doctor say this, Feng Zhen's anxious heart calmed down a little. What happened to me? Wan Xiu wanted to sit up after she woke up, but before she could do anything, Feng Zhen pushed her back down. The doctor said that your old illness is acting up again. You have to rest in bed for the next few days and rest well. You can't get up as you please. Feng Zhen didn't say what the doctor had guessed. He didn't want to rejoice for nothing and make Wan Xiu feel bad. It was better to wait for her body to recover and confirm her pregnancy. Wan Xiu said, Before I fainted, I did feel tired all over. Did the doctor say if it was serious? Feng Zhen said, as long as you rest well, it won't be serious. I will send people to keep an eye on you for the next few days. No matter how important it is, you have to put it aside for now. Wan Xiu smiled and said, it's already the new year. How can I miss out on the social interactions between families? Feng Zhen frowned. That's not right. Your husband is right in front of you. How can he let you worry about these things? She was doubting his ability. Wan Xiu realized that the people around her had a strange attitude towards her. Feng Zhen, on the other hand, had his eyes glued to her body. Even if she made a big movement, he would turn pale with fright. Feng Yi, that child, greeted her every morning through the door. She kept asking about her health, whether she had an appetite today, and if there was anything she wanted to eat. Needless to say, the maidservants who served her were even worse. Wan Xiu was speechless. She seemed to smell a conspiracy. It was as if everyone around her knew a common secret, but she was the only one keeping it from her. Could it be that she had contracted some kind of terminal illness and was about to die? Was that why Feng Zhen and his son were so paranoid? Wan Xiu lay on the mattress for a few days. Her body felt weak. After a few more days, she was finally allowed to sit for a while. Could it be that I really have contracted an incurable disease? Wan Xiu's heart sank. She never thought that she could be pregnant. The trauma left by that incident was too great. The child she had longed for so long had only been in her belly for 2 months before her birth father forced her to abort her. The doctor told her that it would be difficult for her to have another child in this lifetime. Wan Xiu tried to nurse her body and tried to give Feng Zhen one, but nothing happened. After the new year, Feng Yi didn't stay at home anymore. She moved to the dormitory in the Golden Scale Academy. Feng Zhen didn't agree. The dormitory in the academy was good for ordinary people, but it couldn't compare to home. Feng Yi smiled and said, son, you have to focus on preparing for the graduation exams. Even if you don't get first place, you have to be in the top 3. That's a double blessing. What double blessing? Of course, it meant that he did well in the exams and his mother's pregnancy was stable. Father, I'll leave mother in your care. Feng Yi was worried. Her father was very attentive to work, but he was careless when it came to family and personal life. When Feng Zhen heard this, he said, a real man must keep his word. If he doesn't do well, he should repent in front of his ancestors. In the past, he only had one precious child. He couldn't hit, punish, or scold him. Now that he had a new successor, he could do whatever he wanted. Before the first month passed, the doctor came again. Feng Zhen's muscles were tense, and his forehead was covered in sweat. How is it? The doctor cupped his fists and congratulated. Congratulations, sir. Your wife is already 2 months pregnant. Her pulse is strong and her pregnancy is stable. Feng Zhen was mentally prepared, but he was still overjoyed. Wan Xiu was dumbfounded. What? She's pregnant. Chapter 1761. Subconsciously, she placed her hand on her flat abdomen. Tears gathered in her eyes and after a while, tears rolled down her cheeks. She had already given up hope. She didn't expect God to give her such a big surprise. My wife. My good wife. Feng Zhen wanted to hug Wan Xiu, but stopped halfway. He retracted his hand, afraid that he would break this porcelain doll. Feng Yi received the news and rushed back. She didn't see her mother, but saw her father sitting in the corridor. I've given up Hanshi powder for many years, but now I'm craving it. But I can't touch it, so I got a few jars of wine. Feng Zhen saw his son and pointed at the mat beside him, indicating for him to sit down and drink with him. Son, there's a new heir in the Fengs. Feng Yi smiled. Congratulations, father. Feng Zhen drank the wine and reeked of alcohol. He didn't dare to enter the room and suffocate Wan Xiu. He could only wait outside, suppressing the joy in his heart. When he spoke, his hands and feet were trembling. It was clear how excited he was. He used both hands to rub his cold face to calm himself down. he slowly descended from the clouds of joy to the earth. After half a jar of wine, Feng Zhen's face was stained with a drunken flush. When I first confirmed that your mother was pregnant, I was ecstatic and relieved at the same time. Feng Zhen's way of educating his son was more modern. It was completely different from the traditional way of education. As a result, he was very close to his son and there was nothing he couldn't say. Father's body looks healthy, but I failed terribly when I was young. If I have a younger brother or sister, I'll have to, Feng Yi said. Father, you're in your prime. It's too early to talk about this. Feng Zhen smiled. It's not early. You're getting married soon. How can I not accept my old age? The father and son were quiet for a while. Feng Zhen suddenly brought up an old story. Do you know about Hanshi powder? Feng Yi nodded. I do. The headmaster of the academy said that this is harmful. Although it can treat cold illnesses, it has a huge side effect. It's not good to use it often. Feng Zhen said, this was once popular among the aristocrats. I was addicted to it for a while but was forced by the Lord to quit. The feeling of quitting Hanshi powder was not good. The process was like thousands of worms biting into the bones. Without perseverance, one wouldn't be able to persevere. Father too? Feng Yi asked, how did father survive? Feng Zhen smiled and said, this is partly due to the Lord's various methods, but it is also due to your efforts. Sons? Feng Zhen said, when I was trying to get rid of the Hanshi powder, I was in so much pain that I wanted to die. There were a few times where I was struggling between illusion and reality. In my days, I even thought that I was using that thing and I was walking on air. And it seemed to be the butler's voice beside my ear that De Langjun had passed away. The first Langjun had passed away? Feng Yi was surprised. Wasn't he the first Langjun of the Feng mansion? Feng Zhen said. I don't know how much time had passed, but the wonderful taste of the Hanshi powder slowly wore off. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the entire residence was decorated with white mourning clothes. There was a coffin in the mourning hall and you were lying inside. The housekeeper said that first Langjun saw that I was unconscious after taking the Hanshi powder. He mistakenly thought that something had happened and hurriedly went to look for me. However, he accidentally stepped on the green moss and slipped into the pond. After catching a cold, he passed away. That was the most crucial and painful time to abstain from Hanshi powder. Even with Jiang Pingji's help, Feng Zhen still couldn't bear it. He was in so much pain that he couldn't differentiate between reality and illusion. He mistook the hallucination of Feng Yi's death as reality. When he successfully abstained from Hanshi powder and his mind was clear, he then realized that his son was still alive and well. Feng Yi said, isn't your son living well in front of you, father? Feng Zhen smiled and drank a mouthful of wine. He said, yes, in the blink of an eye, the skinny and weak little boy from back then is going to have a family and a career. Feng Yi said, not only can father see your son settle down and start a career, but you also have to plan for your younger brother or sister's marriage in the future. How hard is it to plan? Look around and see which family's boy or girl is suitable and learn from you to abduct one. Look, Feng Zhen didn't have to worry about Feng Yi's marriage. The daughter-in-law he married was the best. This was called capability. He was more capable than his father. Feng Yi smiled and said, what if it's the one who was abducted? Feng Zhen said, remember to support your sister. If anyone dares to bully her, just beat them up. Many years later, when he recalled this conversation, he was slapped in the face. Both of his faces were slapped swollen. Whether it was his future daughter-in-law or his daughter-in-law's mother, not to mention Feng Yi, even Feng Zhen didn't dare to say no in front of them. What a heartless world it is. Hashtag as the saying goes, people are in high spirits when they encounter happy events. Feng Zhen was beaming with joy and was in a good mood the whole day. Has Feng Longzi changed his mind? Su Ke teased. Feng Zhen's recent behavior was getting closer to his future in-law, Feng Jin. He was as gentlemanly as he could be. Feng Zhen smiled and said, you're going to be a father. You should set a good example for your children. Su Ke said, isn't your wife still pregnant? It was too early to set a good example. Feng Zhen said, it's not early anymore. Children can sense the outside world while still in their mother's womb. That's what Wang Lin taught them in the past. The results are excellent. Su Ku was speechless. He felt that Feng Yi's current appearance had nothing to do with this biological father. It was all because of her desire to survive. Feng Zhen suddenly thought of something and asked Su Ku how old his son and daughter were. Su Ku was a smart person and immediately understood Feng Zhen's evil intentions. He smiled and closed any door that could be coveted, not even leaving a dog hole. Feng Zhen had a new hobby. When he caught someone he was familiar with, he would ask about their children in a roundabout way. In the end, Feng Zhen the good-looking dog had his eyes on the Fu Wang twins. If it was a girl, then he would kidnap the Fu Wang twins. If it was a boy, then he would kidnap the Fu Wang twins. If it was a boy and a girl, then he would kidnap both of them. It would be a good story. The difference of a few years was not a big deal. If Fu Wang knew what he was thinking, he would probably curse. Why was Feng Longzi so fixated on his own family? Just after the first month, a fleet of cars entered the city. Jiang Pingji was flamboyant, but she wasn't one who liked to do big things. She just came back to do something. There was no need for the people to line the streets to welcome her. It would seriously affect traffic and the daily lives of the people. Therefore, when she appeared with Wei Ci and the others, everyone was dumbfounded. For example, Feng Zhen, who left early and got off work, was laughing and talking with Wan Xiu'er about what patterns to choose for the baby's clothes. Who are you talking about? Feng Zhen's face turned pale. The person repeated, "My lord has summoned me urgently." My lord? Wasn't he in Nanxing? Feng Zhen hurriedly got up. In his haste, he almost stepped on the hem of his clothes. Quick, go there immediately. Why did he come back at this time? He just left early to slack off. Wan Xiu'er looked at Feng Zhen, who ran away like a puff of smoke. She sighed in her heart. The maid who was knitting with Wan Xiu'er said, "Why did master leave in such a hurry?" Wan Xiu'er glared at her. Chapter 1762. Jiang? Ji's surprise inspection came too suddenly and caught everyone off guard. Almost everyone asked 3 questions from the bottom of their hearts. What am I doing? Without a doubt, people like Feng Zhen, who came late and left early, complained incessantly. They wished they could step on 2 Nez's firestorm wheels, stick a pair of Lei Zhenzi's wings on their backs, and flip a godly sage's somersault cloud. Ji took the lead in front of him and destroyed the evidence of him coming late and leaving early. Unfortunately, they didn't have the ability to do so. His lord was a doer, so it was a tragedy. When Feng Zhen arrived and met his lord's half-smiling eyes, Feng Longzi had a strange feeling that he had nowhere to hide. He forced himself to smile awkwardly but politely, and shamelessly gave Jiang Qingho a smile. Ji bowed and sat down stiffly. Feng Zhen looked calm on the surface, but he was panicking inside. He kept praying that his lord didn't notice him. Just as he was sweating anxiously, Su Ku's question temporarily solved the problem, making him feel like he had escaped from death. Why didn't anyone tell us in advance that our lord is coming back? Butler Su Ku showed a disapproving expression. His lord was so old but still so capricious. Although the situation in Dongqing was much more peaceful than other places, it wasn't safe everywhere. There were always some unruly people in some places who were uncivilized and harmed the people. If these bandits bumped into their lord and disturbed her, it would be their fault as her subjects. Not only that, the road conditions were tough. No one knew which would come first, an accident or tomorrow. If his lord had an accident because of her lack of care, Su Ku and the others couldn't absolve themselves of the blame. Jiang? Ji said, "Just 1 trip back and the people already lined the streets to welcome us. Although it was grand, it was too disturbing. If it wasn't adjusted well, they would be crowded and worried about accidents. After thinking about it, I brought people back to the city quietly. That's why I didn't inform you in advance." Even in her era, once there was a large outdoor event, there was a chance of accidents, such as being trampled, not to mention the people of this era. Jiang? Ji Yunshu was not someone who would torture ordinary people for the sake of vanity. It was not easy for ordinary people to regain their passion for life after experiencing the chaos of war. Ji did not want to cause a commotion just for the sake of extravagance and disturb the normal lives of the people. Her reasoning was reasonable, and Su-ku and the others couldn't say anything bad about it. After all, their lord's starting point was for the good of the people. Not only could he not brag, but he also had to shut his eyes and brag as hard as he could. Since ancient times, how many people had been as considerate and meticulous as his lord who loved the people as her own children? If it was someone else's house, they would want to hear the sound of gongs and drums and the sound of firecrackers. It would be best if everyone in the world came to worship them. Ginger? Ji used her ability to gain another wave of fans, and the filter of her fans increased by 10%. I came back this time to take care of some matters. Ginger? When Ji said this, Feng Zhen, who was below, froze in fear. His back straightened. Su-ku asked, "What is it that the Lord has to personally come back?" Nowadays, there were no four-wheeled sports cars, planes, yachts, or other forms of transportation. It would take more than a month to travel from Nanxing to Dongqing. Based on his lord's journey, she spent most of the New Year's Eve on the road. If it wasn't something important, why would she suffer like this? Ginger? Ji said, "It's mainly about the graduation assessment for the first-year students of the Golden Scale Academy. These people have been nurtured by the Academy for many years and have been taught with great effort. Not only do the great scholars of the Academy have high hopes for them, but so do I." Su-ku couldn't help but be moved. How could those students bear the burden of his lord's heavy efforts? For them, she had specially rushed back from the front line, where the war situation had just stabilized, and suffered for more than a month on the road. If any of these students failed the assessment, they should really die as an apology and waste so many years of education. Ginger? Ji Ye's words moved everyone, but a few insiders and the 5 million salted fish in the livestream wanted to roll their eyes. Didn't she know what she was thinking in her heart? She did come back for the graduation assessment, but her main purpose was to use this opportunity to establish the imperial examination system and give the aristocrats a general. Although they lampooned, other than Wei Ci and salted fish, no one knew how powerful the imperial examinations were. It was like a heavy punch, completely breaking the monopoly of the aristocrats and the bloodline inheritance that everyone was used to. It was groundbreaking. Because of the imperial examinations, the lofty aspirations of becoming a farmer in the morning and going to the emperor's hall in the evening could be realized. He had misjudged the hidden meaning behind this graduation assessment and was destined to be defeated by Jiang Xiang. Ji was caught unprepared. After all, it's the first time. There can't be any mistakes in all aspects. Have you prepared any rules? Remote communication was not as convenient as face-to-face communication. Ji Ye's instructions to them were very concise, and many parts were not explained in detail. Now that they were back, they could communicate however they wanted. Su-ku and the rest had prepared everything before the new year, and now they could use it to complete their task. Ginger? Ji flipped through it casually and said, "There's nothing wrong with this set of rules, you can use it directly." The person in charge secretly heaved a sigh of relief. But, Ginger? Ji added, and everyone's hearts that had just calmed down suddenly jumped up. She said, "There's no harm in using more formality to make the students acknowledge the Golden Scale Academy more, and to make the students who will be taking the graduation assessment more seriously." Everyone did not understand. Ginger? Ji said, "Rank the graduation assessment results, and the top 50 students will be rewarded." Reward? The chief butler who was in charge of finance frowned and asked, "How will they be rewarded?" Be it the public treasury or the Lord's private treasury, they were not rich at the moment, and it was impossible to reward them generously. Moreover, the academy had more than this batch of students. They couldn't possibly reward them generously every year, right? There were 200 to 300 students in the main academy, but there were still more than 20 branches. How should they deal with this? Su-ku hoped that his lord would be more clear-headed and stop squandering. She could not afford it anymore. Ginger? Ji said in a low voice, "After enrolling, every student will receive a student token as proof of entering and leaving the Golden Scale Academy. The student's basic information will be recorded on it. Let's do it this way. The top students who graduate this time will receive a custom-made graduation token. The first 3 will be forged with silver, the 4th to the 50th will be forged with bronze, and the 50th and above will be forged with wood. The so-called graduation token was the graduation certificate, the proof that the students had completed their studies in the Golden Scale Academy. Although this thing was useless and worthless, it was an honor. In this era where honor and spirit were important, a small token could increase the sense of belonging a lot. After Su-ku heard this, he calculated the cost and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The cost was not high, the most expensive was 3 silver tokens, and the size of the token could be discussed. However, Su-ku was probably happy too early. Ginger? Ji took the opportunity to mention the concept of graduation uniforms. Well, to be honest, the cost of this uniform was much more expensive than any brand. Chapter 1763. Although he said so as a good subordinate of his master, Su-ku naturally had to do it for her. He casually agreed, but his heart was bleeding with heartache. After finishing this matter, Jiang Yushu said, Jiunshu then asked about the situation in Dongqing over the past 2 years. Even though Su-ku and the others would send him news every month, it was still not as detailed as knowing it himself. She was able to fight at the front line with peace of mind, largely thanks to this group of meritorious soldiers stationed in the rear. Ji couldn't do anything at the front line. In terms of opportunities to make contributions, the front lines naturally had the most opportunities. Otherwise, why would those generals want to go to war? However, Su-ku, Feng Jin, and the others were able to calm down and defend the rear so that she did not have to worry about anything. It was really commendable. Ginger? As a mature master, Ji would naturally not neglect this group of people. Raising officials was like raising a house cat. From time to time, one had to pacify them. Even if they were not given much to eat, they would still diligently contribute. Not getting a response for one's efforts was the most disappointing. In the words of a certain salted fish who had resigned due to being wronged in the workplace, he could grit his teeth and bear with the grievances of his body, but not his heart. Ginger? Ji kept on praising her. Su-ku and the others didn't show it on the surface, but they were extremely pleased. Feng Jin said in a reserved manner, It's my duty to take care of the rear for my lord. I don't deserve such praise. Modesty is a virtue, also known as showing off. Ginger? When Ji returned, it was rather late. The sky darkened rather early in this season. Seeing that it was getting dark outside, she suggested for everyone to return first. If there was anything else, they could discuss it the next day. More than 20 people bowed and were about to leave. Ji suddenly called out to a certain someone. Zisher, stay here. Feng Zhen's back stiffened, and he thought to himself, the heavens want me dead. Feng Jin, who had heard the commotion, glanced at Feng Zhen, then looked at Wei Ci. His expression did not show, but there was some doubt in his eyes. How rare. In the past, it was always Zishao who stayed behind. But now it's Zisher. Su-ku was a serious person, but when he said that, it was obvious that he was snickering, which sounded indecent. Feng Jin said, Who asked Feng Zhen to fish in troubled waters? Is it reasonable to be late and leave early? He was lucky not to be discovered, but he deserved to be caught by the Lord. Feng Jin really didn't want to admit that this guy was his future in-law. Fortunately, his future son-in-law didn't have Feng Zhen's bad habits. Su-ku stifled a laugh and said, My luck is terrible. Feng Jin said, I personally think that this fellow has been blinded by happiness recently. Let Lord teach him a lesson so that he can sober up. What's wrong with being a father at this age? It's not like he's in his 70s or 80s. Why would he be happy to have a son? Look at how he's floating in the sky. Su-ku said gloatingly, I'm just afraid that my lord's methods have scared him and he's in trouble. Who's going to do all those things then? Sure enough, the friendship between colleagues was all fake. It was all plastic friendship. Feng Zhen, who had been asked to stay, understood for the first time what it meant to be isolated and helpless. Ginger? Ji Yunshu was just trying to scare him. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, she finally spoke. Of course, he wasn't going to ask Fengzhen why he had left so early. No matter how reckless Feng Longzi was, he still needed his dignity. Ji Yunshu would not embarrass his own people over such a small matter. I heard that your wife is pregnant? Fengzhen was stunned. He didn't know how his lord knew. She had only been in the city for a short while, but she actually knew about such a small matter. It could be seen that she was very attentive. Thus, Fengzhen's nervousness disappeared and was replaced by warmth. Yes, but the doctor said it's still early, and there were signs of miscarriage before, so we have to be more careful in the first few months. Ginger? Ji Yi congratulated Fengzhen. With the exception of a few, most of the officials were the sons and daughters of the first wife. Even Su Ku, who had been separated from his wife for many years, was working hard to catch up. Now he had a son and 2 daughters. Only Fengzhen was pitifully small, with only one son, Feng Yi. Although this son was quite good at fighting, and the other children were no match for him, he was still at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, and his ability to resist risks was also weak. If anything happened to Feng Yi, Fengzhen would become a middle-aged man who had lost his only child. Do you have a name? Fengzhen's nerves were taut. When he thought of his family's indescribable ability to come up with names, his heart trembled. I still don't know if it's a boy or a girl. How should it be named? Ginger? Ji assertively said, the boy will be named Fengyu. You can name the girl whatever you want. Fengzhen looked at Jiang. Ji looked as if she had seen a ghost. The child in his wife's womb was his. Why did his lord's attitude make it seem like it was hers? What kind of position did that place him, her biological father? Fengzhen wanted to resist in his heart, but his body was unusually honest. This is a pretty good name. This subject thanks Lord on behalf of Lin for bestowing this name upon him. Fengzhen, QAQ. Ing. If he didn't let his father experience the joy of naming, he would have the illusion that his son was born for nothing. However, speaking of which, why does this Fengyu sound so familiar? Fengzhen also had a superb memory. After he returned home, he tossed and turned restlessly. Finally, in the middle of the night, he woke up in shock. Don't let your Fengyu harm my yen. Back then, Li Kuan Yu at the wedding banquet with Shangguan Wan, Wei Si's drunken words could be heard clearly. Scared the hell out of me. Fengzhen's movements were so loud that it startled Wan Xiu. What do you mean by scaring someone to death? Did you have a nightmare? Her voice was filled with fatigue. Fengzhen said, Madam, go to sleep first. Your husband just suddenly remembered that Wei Zixiao is a quack. Wan Xiuer's eyes were filled with hidden bitterness. His beautiful wife was sleeping next to him, but this guy was dreaming of his colleague Wei Ci in the middle of the night? Thinking of Wei Ci's face, Wan Xiu sighed. All right, to Fengzhen, Wei Ci's face was indeed quite lethal. Sleep. Fengzhen murmured, that can't be. Did he know something back then? After a while, Feng Longzi's attention was focused on one point. Who is Yen? Wan Xiu opened her eyes and looked at her husband quietly. I also want to know who Yenner is. Can't a pregnant woman sleep in the middle of the night? Fengzhen wanted to say something but stopped himself. Sullenly, he lay down and covered her with the blanket. He reached out and tucked her in so that the cold air wouldn't flow in. Epsilon equals omega epsilon, psi. What if it really was a son? Fengzhen thought about it and reached out to rub Wan Xiu's belly. He murmured, Fengyu is Fengyu. It's not bad if it's a son. Carrot. If that quack Wei Ci's words were accurate, this child of his could marry the Empress concubine in the future. If that was really the case, he would be rich. Little did he know that Ji was thinking the same thing. Even Fengyu from Zisher's family is here. Zixiao has to work hard to catch up. His lord's body temperature was so hot that it seemed like it could scald a person. In the darkness, Wei Ci panted lightly. He felt rather helpless. Before saying this, could you not take out that little thing? Chapter 1764. As for having children, Jiang? Ji really did not have any obsession. Shouldn't she pay a sum of money to the child-rearing organization and go to the incubator to collect it after some time? The old general laughed coldly and snuffed out Jiang. Wake up, you're in the backward ancient times, not the Federation. Speaking of which, why don't you mail me an artificial incubator? It's so tiring to carry a few kilograms of child in my stomach. It's pressing on my internal organs and nerves. Just thinking about it is tiring. I want to feel my conscience and praise the Federation's decision. Banning maternal pregnancy is an epic-making law. After squeezing Wei Ci dry yesterday, she was as lazy as a salted fish today, perfectly acting out the guyu lie that salted fish talked about. Oh, coupled with her half-closed dead fish eyes, she instantly replaced the guyu lie as the new generation of emoticons. Yuaba, then how are you going to explain to outsiders about the child? His stomach hasn't even grown and he's carrying a big fat baby every 3 to 5 months. How are you going to convince everyone that this is their young master? In the eyes of outsiders, this is Jiang? Ji adopted a child from who knows where. There's no guarantee of quality. Who knows if he's a good master? Jiang? Ji heard this and thought she had a chance. She quickly sat up like a carp, sweeping away her previous dispiritedness and laziness. Can you mail it now? If it could be mailed, it would be perfect. Everyone could create as many young masters as they wanted. They could form a football team every year. Yuaba, no, give up. There's no such thing. Jiang? When Ji heard this, he rolled his eyes and continued to lie on the ground. He was like a punctured balloon, instantly deflating. Old General, maternal pregnancy is against the law. How can I break the law knowingly? Jiang? Ji couldn't do anything about it. But as a high-ranking official in the Federation military, she couldn't do that. Yuaba, nonsense. You can just say that you want to see others scratching their ears and cheeks. Why do you have to make such a big deal out of it? Every time people talked about young masters, Jiang? Ji would look like she was watching a good show. Wasn't she afraid that things would turn out badly? Follow Jiang? As Ji grew older, the problem of having children would become more and more serious. People's hearts would waver and something might happen. Old General kindly remind Jiang? Ji said that, but this damned child refused to listen. She laughed and joked. Am I such a childish person? Of course, she wouldn't do something pointless for the sake of such a vile interest. If he repeatedly made his own people worry, he would become bitterly disappointed as time went by. She had been dragging on and refusing to have children. Firstly, she wanted this life to be as close as possible to the previous life in Wei Ci's memory. She wanted Feng Yu to be Feng Yu and Jiang Yan to be Jiang Yan, even though she knew that this was impossible. Even if the parents were the same and the embryos were conceived at the same time, it was impossible for them to be exactly the same, let alone at different times. He was afraid that apart from the name, everything else would be different. As a human of the Federation, deep down, Jiunshu did not have any feelings or obsession towards the bloodline of his children. If children were a form of comfort to Wei Ci, it did not matter whether he gave birth sooner or later. Apart from this, she had an even more important reason. Ginger? The body that Ji was currently using, Lu Shi, was born into a landowning household. Even though she had no connection with the Lu family and had left the sect in her early years, she was still a member of the Lu family. Ginger? Ji Yunshu wanted to see when they could no longer sit still. If they could no longer sit still, she could take the opportunity to end things with the Lu family and restore her original name. Although a name was just a code and it was common to change one's surname, it was still quite annoying to be called Lu Shi all day long. The traces left behind in the future also belonged to Lu Shi. All the rise and fall of glory and disgrace had nothing to do with Ginger. Ji had nothing to do with it. This was intolerable. Your Abba, TSK, I remember someone once said that official titles were worthless. Jiang? Ji laughed and said, nonsense. Isn't leaving a name in history to show off to the future generations? Otherwise, what's the point of living? Your Abba, a capricious woman. Jiang? Ji said, children are indeed troublesome. I don't even have the experience of raising a child, let alone giving birth. Your Abba, It's fine as long as your little man knows how to raise children. I don't think anyone expects you to teach children well. Jiang? Ji Yunshu was not a teacher. No matter how good a seedling was, it would be a waste in her hands. She might even mislead the children. I said that he's an adult. What little man, and little man? Listening to it, she had the illusion that she was raising a wolf puppy. Your Abba, huh? Do you need me to go through the definitions of adulthood and underage in the federal law? Jiang? Ji was speechless. She could not continue the topic. She wanted to continue lying in bed, but the chores outside would not give her the chance. I thought that a winner in life should be able to earn mountains of gold and silver without doing anything. Jiang? Ji Yunshu was not afraid of the cold, but she did not like the feeling of being surrounded by cold air. Even if there was carbon in the room, it was easy to be poisoned by carbon monoxide because of poor ventilation. It was much colder inside than under the covers. She muttered and complained, I'm already the most powerful feudal lord in the world, and I'm only one step away from becoming the emperor. Why do I have to worry about selling noodles to earn money from selling cabbage? I wake up earlier than chickens, sleep later than dogs, eat worse than pigs, and work more than donkeys. If one were to talk about envy, Jiang? Ji Yunshu was most envious of those muddle-headed rulers who used all the resources in the world to support one person. There were 3,000 beauties in the harem, and it would take 10 years to sleep with one of them in a day. Of course, this was purely the imagination of poor scholars. Just like the joke that the salted fish told her a while ago, the peasants guessed that the emperor used a golden hoe to work in the fields, and the empress used a golden mallet to wash clothes. It was impossible to have 3,000 beauties, but it was possible to have dozens of them. Jiang? Ji Yunshu only had Wei Si, and the jealousy of a young man was great. As for her, carrying a golden hoe to work every day was not as good as working in the fields. The salted fish were not happy. Tudafeichio, streamer, before you say this, feel your conscience first, and then look at Zixiao and the rest, okay? If it was Jiang? Ji Yunshu could still earn some cabbage money, but Wei Si and the rest would be spending their youth and energy instead. Jiang? Ji Yunshu was too lazy to look at them. This was clearly her live stream, but the fans were all other people, and from time to time, they would diss her for their idols. Forgive her for being blunt, but the idols that these salted fish used to be fans of were now middle-aged uncles in their 30s. Lanting Xianxia, that's the charm of a mature man. She didn't know if that group of people had good control over their bodies, or if they ate too little meat, but almost none of them had put on weight in their middle ages. They didn't have beer bellies, baldness, or greasy skin. They were still elegant, cultured, and tasteful. It had to be Jiang? When Ji Yunshu saw Huang Song, she took back her words. She had been busy the entire afternoon, and Jiang? Ji Yunshu couldn't be bothered to get the kitchen to cook, so she found a restaurant to eat something, and ended up meeting an old friend. She glanced at Huang Song's stomach, then at his face and chin, feeling very sad. Did you cultivate the 9 return to 1 grand technique? Huang Song was very puzzled. What 9 return to 1 grand technique? Jiang? Ji Yunshu stared at his stomach. The muscles in your body have fused together. Huang Song, Feng Ju, who had just come out of the private room, happened to hear this flirtatious remark. Chapter 1765. The plump Huang Song wasn't actually that fat. It was just that the management of his body had slackened, causing him to have a double chin, a bigger face, and a small belly. This image diluted the sharpness of the youth and added a bit of benevolence. Ji was unable to describe her current feelings. Many years ago, Huang Song, this fellow, had also been riding horses and snuggling up to women. What a bright young man he was. Now that the edges and sharpness of his body had been polished off, although he had become benevolent, to those who were familiar with his former appearance, it still made them feel a little sad. Ginger? Ji Yunshu would not grieve over the changing seasons. Her emotions only lingered for a second or two before disappearing completely. Huang Song added, "This is the trend pursued by scholars nowadays. You're as thin as a bean. What do you know?" Ginger? Ji Yunshu was surprised. Had Huang Song rebuked her? Although those famous people have nothing to do all day and seem to be a pain in the ass, there's nothing wrong with their eyes. Why would they chase after plump bodies? Ginger? Dee was shocked. She had only been away from Wanzhou to fight in the war for a few years. That group of young, middle-aged, and old people who spent their days eating, drinking, and having fun and gathering people to mourn the passing of spring had actually changed their taste in beauty. Compared to before, Huang Song's attractiveness had dropped by more than 20%, and this was still considered a trend? That's right. The modern trend was the fashion circle, while the current trend was the celebrity circle. Whatever the celebrities, socialites, in the celebrity circle chased after, the direction of the trend would shift. That year when Hanshi powder was popular, it was a trend in the circle of celebrities to avoid bathing to catch lice. They preferred fair skin, long legs, and beautiful features. Let's not talk about the future. When Ji went to war in the past, she remembered that it was popular among the celebrities to have thin waists and big breasts, regardless of gender. Plump is popular now? Judging from Huang Song's reaction, it seemed that his style was quite popular. It should be a model in the celebrity circle. However, this was not the main point. The main point was, who are you calling beans? Huang Song snorted. He didn't need to say anything. At this moment, Jiang Yu, who usually did not like to talk to him, was stunned. Ji's Feng Ju came out to be the peacemaker at this moment, dispelling the smoke with just a few words. Ginger? Ji Yunshu rolled her eyes and agreed to Feng Ju's suggestion to let her in for a free meal. Anyway, she would not be the one paying the bill. Huang Song would become poor because of her. After the three of them took their seats, Feng Ju smiled and said, "Speaking of which, this trend is thanks to the Duke of Lanting." Ginger? Ji said, "What does that have to do with me?" She was 1.75 meters tall, well-proportioned and tall. She had never known fat in her previous lives. How could they slander her like this? Feng Ju said, "Does the Duke of Lanting remember the public toilets that you ordered to be built?" Ginger? Ji Yunshu frowned. Although many public toilets had been built and many cities were gradually improving, they were still public toilets. Even if there were specialized people to manage and clean them, the smell was still terrible. All in all, the mention of public toilets brought up a bad image. What's the connection? Feng Ju said, "The Duke of Lanting built the public toilets for many purposes. The waste from the public toilets was used to fertilize the fields, indirectly increasing the output of the fields. The few livestock farms built outside the city were also on the right track. Even the common people could eat 2 or 3 meals of meat every month, not to mention the families who were better off. With good food and a comfortable life, his body naturally became heavier. This has something to do with the fact that famous men don't like being thin, but like being plump." Back then, Feng Ju had recommended his classmate, Do Shi, through his father, who was also the big boss of the farming family. With his knowledge and Jiang Ji's advanced farming management philosophy, he vigorously reclaimed the wasteland and improved the fertility of the farmland. In addition, the heavens had given him face in the past few years, and the fields had a bumper harvest every year. The food harvested was not only enough to supply the frontline soldiers in battle, but there was still a lot of surplus in the homes of the common people. With better living conditions and better food and living conditions, wouldn't their bodies become fat? For the common people, being fat was not ugly. Instead, it was a symbol of wealth. It proved that there was plenty of surplus food in the house and that the living conditions were good. Those celebrities who chased after a thin and morbidly thin body obviously had nothing better to do and were tormenting themselves. Due to the influence of Wanzhou's culture, these idling famous men also changed their usual preferences, and there was a wave of plump people. Jiang? Ji smiled and said, "In that case, this is indeed due to me. I'll accept it." However, Huang Song's meal was tasteless. In the end, he asked Jiang Ji, "Do I really not look good like this?" Jiang? Ji said, "It's easy to get rich when you're fat, and it costs a lot of fabric." Huang Song was speechless. A few arrows pierced through him in succession. Jiang? Ji added, "I remember why. He's also a famous man. Don't you see that he's no different from before?" Don't just follow the trend of famous men. Famous men's mouths are used to run trains. Huang Song was speechless. He turned to look at his little friend. He was still as handsome as ever. Huang Song looked down at the small puddle on the back of his hand and felt even more stifled. Feng Zhu secretly glanced at Jiang. Ji didn't say anything. This meal was paid for by Feng Zhu. This Feng Sanlang was rich, but he wasn't poor. Ji ate 7 or 8 times more than what he and Huang Song paid for the meal, but he didn't even frown. Jiang? Ji felt at ease. On the way back, he pondered about what was wrong. Feng Sanlang is expressing his goodwill to me, but he doesn't look like he has any plans to become an official. If he was sincerely convinced by Jiang? With Feng Zhu's pride, he wouldn't want to go to Jiang? Ji had a good impression of him in front of Ji so that he could make a good start. He would most likely follow Feng Jin's path and start from the bottom instead of landing out of nowhere. Therefore, Feng Zhu's display of goodwill was a little strange. Jiang? Ji turned around to test Feng Jin. She asked if his bratty brother was agitated or if he was being pressured by his family. Feng Jin was silent for a long time after hearing this. He said with a strange expression, "Perhaps." "What?" "He just wants to be friends with you, my lord." Jiang? Ji was speechless. Was he playing a friend? Feng Jin said awkwardly, "Why?" "This child has always liked to think that he's smart and a little naive. My lord, please don't be calculative with him." No matter what, he would first belittle his brother, lest his lord got angry and find someone to settle scores with. Jiang? Ji smiled and said, "This friend is interesting. He's worth befriending." It was not impossible to be purely friends without mixing interests and politics. That night, Jiang? Ji asked Wei Ci about Feng Zhu. She only knew that Feng Zhu was her first aid in Wei Ci's life. But in this life, this guy followed Huang Song. Ji did not expect to poach him, so she did not ask about many things in detail. Now that she was interested, she wanted to know more about Feng Zhu. Wei Ci let out a sigh and briefly explained what had happened. Jiang? Ji pinched her chin and said, "Why does it sound like my life was a tragedy?" Wei Ci said, "After all, Feng Zhu was born in the Feng family. No matter how rebellious he was, the family was his natural responsibility. In order to protect the family, Feng Zhu might not feel good about going against his former best friend, who was now the emperor. What about you?" Wei Ci smiled very sadly. "Isn't my clan leader the lord?" Chapter 1766. Ji looked at the middle-aged Huang Song, then turned to look at Zixiao. Jiang? Ji realized that someone was still too thin. Hence, she had a new hobby recently. She would feed Wei Ci when she had nothing to do. In the words of the salted fish in the live-streaming room, it was a large-scale scene of dog abuse. Yet, they watched happily and wished they could die of sweetness. For example, the following scene, "Is it sweet?" Jiang? Ji stuffed a lemon-flavored lollipop into Wei Ci's mouth when he wasn't paying attention. Wei Ci had recently gotten used to the strange sweet food that his lord had gotten from somewhere. It looked strange but tasted very good. He was stunned for a while and was about to taste it carefully. He didn't expect someone to take the lollipop away and lean forward to kiss it. She smacked her lips and said, "It does taste quite sweet." Wei Ci was speechless. His lord's various flirting methods were really unbearable. Wei Ci was not used to it at first, but he calmed down after a few times. Jiang? Ji returned the lollipop to him and said with a smile, "It's a new flavor. I heard it's a limited edition Christmas." Although Wei Ci was in his early 30s, he actually liked sweet food. However, the sugar-making technology in this era was very backward. Artificial sugar was mostly made from starch. The sweetness was not strong and impure. The finished product was not easy to preserve and the production was very low. Even landowning households couldn't eat sweets as they pleased. For example, stone honey, a solid product made from sugar cane, was still a precious tribute during the Great Xia dynasty. Not many people had the right to enjoy it. Now the technology had improved a little, but the supply was still limited. Those who were not rich were not qualified to enjoy it. Jiang? The snacks that Ji took out were bought by the old chief. They were beautifully packaged and had a wide variety. Wei Ci was not used to this kind of thing at first, but he deeply liked it after eating a few more pieces. Jiang? Ji was also happy to feed him. It sounds very precious. Wei Ci did not ask where these things came from and deliberately ignored this point. His lord was special. There was no need to make a fuss if she had some inhuman means. Jiang? Ji said, it said that Christmas is a foreign festival. The products produced during the festival are produced and sold in limited quantities. Wei Ci asked a question that came from the bottom of his heart. Sell it better? No, sell it more expensive. Jiang? Ji Yunshu said, it's just a gimmick. It's nothing more than making use of people's mentality of, the rarer something is, the greater its value, to inflate the price of the item. It's still the same thing, just that it's being sold under a different name and the packaging material is different. Wei Ci was a little surprised when he heard that. He did not expect that there was such a business method. The merchant who came up with this method is indeed a genius. This seemed like a strategy used by strategists to plot against the human heart. Ginger? Ji laughed. Aren't businessmen supposed to earn the most money with the least cost? If you're not talented, how can you earn money? Wei Ci said, but if that's the case, isn't it too unfair to the people who sold the goods? It is not advisable to disrupt the market price. Merchants made too much money. They could earn several years' worth of ordinary people's money just by reselling their goods. Wouldn't the people be jealous? At that time, every household would follow suit. Who would be willing to farm in peace? Without food production, the entire society would be in chaos, and there would be endless troubles. Wei Ci knew that promoting commerce was beneficial to economic development, but he also had to restrain the merchants to prevent them from harming the country. If it's a healthy competition, it's fine. Ji said, I have the intention to support the merchants, but I won't let them bite me when they grow too big. From the beginning, I have to set up complicated rules so that they are always under my control. The people's agricultural taxes should not be too high or too heavy, but tax is the foundation of a country. If the taxes related to agriculture are too little, it will naturally have to be made up from other places. Wei Ci laughed. My lord is indeed not willing to suffer losses. Jiang? Ji said, of course I'm not willing to suffer losses no matter what. She saw that Wei Ci loved sweets so much, and an idea popped up in her mind. She could not always let the old chief buy on her behalf. Who knew what messy place he would go next time, and what would happen if there was no sugar? She might as well develop it herself and improve the current sugar production process. When Wei Ci heard that his lord wanted to expand the scale of sugarcane cultivation, he suddenly had a déjà vu. My lord is only doing this because of Ci. This is not appropriate. Jiang? Ji laughed. Sugar should be a snack suitable for all ages. Not only do you like it, children like it even more. I like it too. The production of this thing is small, and not many people are qualified to enjoy it. If it can be produced on a large scale, the sales will definitely not be bad. Wei Ci said, but this thing is not a necessity. How can we waste precious arable land for it? Jiang? Ji said, look at Wanzhou. Because the people's lives are rich, the circle of celebrities now has a trend of plentiful beauty. From this, the better the people's lives are, the more they need to enjoy life, not to eat and wear warm clothes. I'm doing this because I want to put it in the private treasury. After a few wars, the private treasury is so poor that even mice can't take a fancy to it. How are we going to raise children in the future? Even if the country had not yet been founded, everyone knew that Jiang Ji would definitely become the empress. Once she became the empress, she would be part of the royal family. In the past, the emperor's expenses were linked to the national treasury. Since Ji's debut, her private and public treasury had been independent. It would be the same in the future when the country was founded. The royal family would spend money on smuggling, and the national treasury would not be touched to prevent the emperor from being extravagant and causing chaos in the country. In this way, whether the royal family lived well would depend on whether the private treasury was plentiful. Jiang? Ji naturally had to think of a way to get a stable income for the private treasury. She felt that promoting snacks was not bad. She could benefit the people's taste buds and earn some money. Jiang? Ji analyzed for Wei Ci, you can't just look at the surface. You have to look deeper. The birth of a new industry will also create a large number of jobs, so that the idle people can settle down. With something to look forward to, they naturally won't think of creating trouble. Don't look at it as a small piece of candy. It can feed thousands of people. Xiao, don't you think I'm right? I'm really not using my official position for personal gain. At most, she could get inspiration from him. While benefiting the people, she could also satisfy the little man's desire for good food. Wei Ci was speechless. He clearly knew that his lord had made up this excuse, but this person had the ability to make her words sound convincing. The so-called sugar in this era was mostly maltose, commonly known as maltose or marinated sugar. The other was maltose. Sugar was made from sugar cane, but it was very rare because sugar cane was precious and the production was low. Only the nobles had the right to enjoy it. Jiang? Ji had made this decision on a whim, but the people under her could only bitterly carry it out. There was no choice. They couldn't win against their lord. His lord wrote down in detail how to grow sugar cane, how much sugar cane could be produced from 1 mu of land, how to extract the syrup to make sugar, and the production process of various flavors of sugar. At the end, there was a large analysis. She calculated how many jobs this industry could create, how many people could have jobs, and the final profit. It was reasonable and well-founded. Chapter 1767. By the way, sugarcane cultivation requires climate. Send someone to Nanxing to find a suitable place. That place has experienced war. There are poor refugees and idle wastelands everywhere. It's more convenient to recruit people and circle the sugarcane cultivation area. Who's going to do this? Jiang? Ji glanced around and randomly picked a few newcomers with better reputations and honest personalities. She sent them on a business trip. The newcomers were stunned by this pie that fell from the sky. They were so happy that they didn't know what to do. Did they think that this was Jiang? Ji Yunshu valued the performance of their abilities. Ji felt that this matter was not difficult. Sending capable people out was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. It was a waste of human resources. Yes, this was a beautiful misunderstanding. It also made the newcomers more motivated. Fengju smiled and teased, "Second brother, how do you feel after meeting such a master?" You heard that, Jiang? Ji had gathered everyone to announce the matter of planting sugarcane. From the proposal to the implementation, it only took a day. Such high efficiency was not only reflected in Jiang, Ji's power and influence among the officials. At the same time, it also showed her ability. She used absolute facts to convince everyone and imperceptibly gave everyone the impression that she was right and there was no need to refute. She was not an incompetent master who made the officials clean up the mess on a whim. They just had to believe in her. With such a wise master, ordinary mediocre people naturally yearned for it. However, for those who were full of talent, it was a little depressing because this master had done what they should do. She had blocked their path and almost made them have nowhere to go. Sugarcane was originally a luxury item. If it was planted on a large scale, the profits could be imagined. According to the normal process, it would take at least half a month of discussion before a decision was made. In the end, it only took a day. The detailed procedures were not given by the officials, but by the master. Feng Jin said, very tiring. High efficiency did not mean less work. How many days did Feng Jin take off in a year? Every day when he opened his eyes, his mind was filled with all kinds of work. He was busy with this and that, like a spinning top. Feng Ju said, "It's indeed tiring." Feng Jin could not help but roll his eyes at his brother. His gaze was saying, "You're a famous scholar who eats and drinks all day. How would you know how tiring it is? Now that you know you're tired, why don't you share your brother's burden?" Feng Ju said, "How?" He had made it very clear last time that his elder brother would not persuade him to become an official, so how could he share his elder brother's burden? Feng Jin said, "You don't have to worry too much about Changxing. Take care of my niece and nephew. Little brat. Huang Song's daughter was being raised as a precious pearl, but his own nephew and niece did not care about it. Was he siding with an outsider? Go take care of the baby. When Feng Ju heard that, his face darkened. His own children, Huang Song's youngest daughter, and his second brother Feng Jin's 2 sons. Was he being treated as a kindergarten teacher? He couldn't do that. If he did, he'd be done for. Because there were no effective contraceptive measures, pregnancy could only be given birth. Feng Jin and Wei Jingxian were young and healthy. In recent years, other than Changxing and the eldest son, they had another son. Who knew if there would be 2 more in another 2 years? Heir Xiong and Heir Sa were still young. There were many couples in their 30s who had children. You're not willing? Feng Jin raised his eyebrows. Feng Ju forced a smile and resisted the urge to vomit blood. How can that be? My 2 nephews are as smart as second brother when he was young. I like them very much. Don't give birth, he couldn't handle it. As a talented person with a high IQ, Feng Ju didn't want to take care of babies for the rest of his life. Little did he know that his good sister-in-law, Wei Jingxian, thought the same. She married Feng Jin and gave birth to 3 children. The burden of childbirth was too great, and it took up too much energy. Now she was a little worried. Because of this, she even had the idea of letting Feng Jin take a concubine. Landowning women let their cheap concubines share the burden of childbirth, and there were many who treated them as byt. The Feng family was born in a prestigious family, and their ancestors were prominent. It was not out of line for Feng Jin to take a concubine. However, this idea only flashed through her mind once before it was extinguished by her. Wei Jingxian was not an ordinary landowning woman. She had worked in the government office for so many years. At the same time that her ability was trained, she had also climbed to a high position. Her thinking was completely different from when she was still married. Her husband was not heaven. He belonged to her alone. Whoever touched him would die. However, pregnancy was really a burden. Wei Jingxian could only privately send people to find effective contraceptive methods. Feng Jin also knew about this, but he turned a blind eye to it. 2 sons and a daughter, all 3 of them were born by the legal wife. This was not a small family. Having more children would also be a burden. The Feng family did not pay attention to having more children, and they had always valued quality over quantity. After all, the resources given to each child by the family were limited. Having 1 more child meant that the other children would be given more. In the end, all the children would not be able to achieve anything. Why bother? Obviously, not everyone had the same awareness as Feng Jin. More people still wished to have more children and more blessings. However, they did not consider the burden and pressure that having more children and blessings would bring to the women. Jiang? When Ji passed by, she heard the gossip of the women's department. The original members of the women's department were a group of literate women who were rescued when they conquered Xiangyang district. After so many years, some of them found a home and left, but there were also some who stayed after marriage and became the pillars of the family. There were also new people who filled in here. They belonged to a special department with real power. Jiang? Ji heard them chatting during lunch break. When they privately complained about childbirth, she revealed a thoughtful expression. Old leader, Jiang? Ji stuck out her buttocks. The old leader knew what she was going to do and immediately rejected her. Your Abba, if you don't want to be taught a lesson, I advise you to keep your thoughts to yourself. The last time I bought a few hundred boxes, I don't know how many he used. Old leader, what are you talking about? I'm a decent person. Ji looked serious. I'm asking you if there are rubber trees over there? She would rather produce it herself than rely on the old leader to buy it for her. Jiang? Ji's history was not very good, but she remembered that the original BYT was a latex product. It would definitely not be a problem to research in this direction. Thinking of this, she felt a headache coming on. Once a woman became pregnant, not only would the woman be punished, but the man who impregnated the woman would also be thoroughly investigated. If the 2 were a couple, both of them would be sent to jail for a period of time, and the fine would be very heavy. If the woman's pregnancy was not voluntary, The time the man would spend in jail would be based on the woman's age. The minimum would be 10 years. The younger the woman was, the longer she would spend in jail. The maximum could be up to 100 years. The man would be sentenced to chemical castration. Even if he was released from jail, he would wear a special ring on his hands and feet that could not be removed for life. Once the distance between him and the woman was less than a certain distance, it would sound a warning and he would be electrocuted. Under such circumstances, the contraceptive surgery in the federal hospital was especially popular. Gradually, there was no market for adult products. Developed to Jiang? In Ji's era, she only knew about BYT from textbooks and documents. She knew that BYT in the early days of interstellar life was extracted from some kind of interstellar creature. It was easy to use and could be perfectly degraded without polluting the environment. But the earlier B, as a bad student, she only knew that it was made of latex smiley face, underscore ABBA, Jiang Xiaojiu, you've really opened my eyes. Asking her to buy rubber trees just to make BLA. Chapter 1768. Is the old general praising me or insulting me? Jiang? Ji's intuition was leaning towards the latter. She couldn't help but feel wronged. Although adult products were private items that were difficult to talk about in this era, the old general was from the same era as her. How could he be so shy as to avoid talking about it? Don't underestimate the adult industry. It was a fertile land that had yet to be developed. There were huge business opportunities. Your ABBA, what do you think? What do you think is worthy of my praise? No matter what rubber is used for, it's more useful than torturing BE, right? The old general didn't think of Jiang. Ji was so useless. This wasn't using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. It was clearly using the ninth heaven Xian thunder to kill an ant. Your ABBA, your performance is enough to make you a disgrace among transmigrated women. You can't even compare to a Mary Sue. Commit suicide to atone for your sins. Jiang? Ji often saw the words, Mary Sue, in the live stream, but she thought that it was the name of a famous person. Now, it seemed that she had misunderstood. She had a good habit of getting to the bottom of things. Ji humbly asked for advice. How was she inferior to a Mary Sue? The old general didn't want to bicker with her. Not long after, the system notified her that Ji had a delivery. She immediately opened the honeycomb delivery cabinet and found a few books lying inside. There were male and female covers. They were all comic book characters with all-like faces, big eyes, European-style double eyelids, and unibrow. The evil emperor wants to hug. Domineering. Ninth Miss? Jiang? Ji read the names of the books and began reading from the first one. The salted fish in the live stream also knew Jiang? Ji and the old general she mentioned could contact each other and even buy and mail things to each other. However, in recent years, the things they bought were mostly snacks. Some of the snacks were familiar to them, while others were completely unknown brands. That big shot was often online, but he was peeping. Many salted fish guessed that the big shot was Jiang, Ji's admirer. There was no lack of salted fish with strange ideas. They even edited a video of the love and hate entanglement between the three of them. There were tens of millions of views and millions of bullet screen comments. Only the heavens knew how salted fish managed to turn the three of them into a love triangle with a strange plot when the old chief didn't even post a few bullet screen comments or show his face. The salted fish thought that they were experienced, but they still underestimated Ji's dirty tricks. They were actually in a place called Harem Drama Streaming Room, accompanying the streamer, chasing the throne, dragon proudly heavens. They were watching a romance novel written by the demonic and arrogant male protagonist vs the arrogant and domineering female protagonist vs the coquettish and flirtatious female protagonist whenever she met the male protagonist, and it was even a physical novel. To Feichio. Host, we've known each other for more than 10 years. Why do we have to hurt each other? Kneeling for Yuepao. Did you guys notice that these books are not new and unopened? Judging from the traces, someone must have read them. So, here's the question, was the last person who read these books the old leader that the streamer mentioned? It was said that the old chief and Jiang Zemin had a close relationship. Ji Zheng was a big shot of the same level. Just the thought of the big boss not reading classified documents but reading Mary Sue novels was fascinating. Smash me with monthly tickets. Am I the only one who feels sorry for my friend? Mandarin was spoken in all dimensions, and Chinese was popular. The Mary Sue novels that the old general mailed to the host were also written in Chinese. What could be more hurtful than this? This was no longer the entire world speaking Mandarin, but all dimensions being ruled by Mandarin. The salted fishes muttered among themselves. Some curious salted fishes searched for the book's name and actually found it. However, the book only had a name and a copy. The author did not upload any content. Taking a closer look at the book's creation date, it was probably Jiang? Ji Zheng read the book for a few minutes. Salted Fish immediately understood. He was impressed by the author's ability. If this wave of popularity was good, the book might become a god. Some readers in the book review section ridiculed that the search volume and popularity was something that even the male genre's platinum hero could not compare to. Jiang? Ji Zheng had a little habit of reading books. Before reading a book, she would first look at the book's title and copy. The book's title and copy were in standard red text format. She thought that she would not read such a lame novel, but in the end, it was delicious. She read for the entire morning, lying on her left side, lying on her right side, lying on her back, and crossing her legs. She did not want to get up at all. The salted fishes also accompanied her to read Mary Sue novels for the entire morning. At first, they complained that they did not want to read such silly and sweet Mary Sue novels, but as they read, they became engrossed. Jiang? Ji flipped faster, and the salted fishes made a lot of noise. Yuban, are you stupid? There's a recording in the live stream room. If you can't watch it in time, can you rewind it frame by frame? The salted fishes, how infuriating! They were actually mocked by the other salted fishes. Wei Ci found Jiang? Ji did not see her for the entire day. When she came to look for her, she found that her lord had unknowingly moved from the room to the outside. The floor was wiped exceptionally clean by her clothes. Wei Ci had never seen such a strange book. Ji was engrossed in reading, so he did not disturb her. Instead, he went forward to take a closer look at the cover. There were strange words with missing arms and legs, and Wei Ci naturally could not appreciate the beauty of artistic words. Zi Xiao, you're interested in this too? Jiang? Ji put down the book and happened to meet Wei Ci's eyes. No matter how engrossed she was, she would not let down her guard against the outside world. She knew before Wei Ci even got close and wanted to see his reaction. Wei Ci said, "May I know what this is for?" Jiang? Ji threw it to him. A novel. It's quite interesting. Although the content is a little weird, the plot is quite well understood. Wei Ci subconsciously took it and took a look. He found that the quality of the paper of this book was better than the best bamboo paper. The thickness and size were the same. The tiny words on it were neat and beautiful. Every stroke seemed to have been copied. Wei Ci rubbed the words with his fingers and found that the surface of the paper was smooth. His fingertips could not feel the uneven marks of the writing, and the ink was not scattered. This was not something that could be achieved by a human. Wei Ci raised his head and looked straight at his lord. His dark eyes were filled with curiosity and surprise. Could this be the woodworking workshop's latest printing technique? When he asked this, Wei Ci's voice was faintly trembling. It was not from shock but from excitement. What about Jiang? Ji's words poured a bucket of cold water on him. No, the woodworking workshop wants to develop this kind of technology, but it is still far from it. Maybe it can be achieved in this lifetime. Ji pointed to the content of the book and said, "I thought you were curious about the content of this book, so I let you read it. I didn't expect you to be concerned about the printing." Wei Ci then looked at the content carefully. He could not understand where the words came from for a long time. In terms of appearance, it was very similar to the words that he was familiar with. But when he read it carefully, the great scholar instantly became illiterate. Of course, words in this era were written vertically from top to bottom and from right to left. But this book was written horizontally from top to bottom and from right to left. Jiang? Ji took the book from his hand. The corners of her lips curled up with some evil intentions. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.